right, it's 7 p.m. Mountain Time, 11/11, 2022. This is Pope Elon by One-Eyed Jack and the Shells. Pope Elon, who right now is destroying Twitter. Diana Southard says, "Good evening, accurate observers of reality." Yeah, that's what we are. Our reality isn't going through their filter. We have Portal Complex says, "Big up to all the female penguins." I'm assuming he means cis female penguins. Truman B 3000, David Hazel, T Dog 135, rafting in. Kevin Mooring got the signal. Yes, I sent out text notifications. Maskless Faceless says, "I'd rather die in Uranus." Yeah, as opposed to dying on Mars. Absolutely. And if you go with Musk, you would, in all likelihood, die on Mars. He's very comfortable with the idea of indentured servitude. I mean, you can't afford a ticket, but yeah, you could work it off on the potato farms, on the Mars base, or really, you won't even be on the surface. I'll say beneath the surface of Mars. Joined by Infinite Muse, Salty Siren, Robert Bell. Phil LeBlanc says, "Hello, fact checkers and media critics." Oh yeah, we reality test the claims of the media. They consider that to be a thought crime. We're a thought crime syndicate here. Infinite Plane Radio is a thought crime syndicate, and that's how it's treated. We're kind of like, we're hunted down, we're ban evaders. You know, I had an art channel on Twitch that they pulled. All I did was I did art. I was doing meme lessons. Why did they pull it? Because the Buffalo Shooter New York streamed on Twitch, and one of my channels on Twitch had to do with conspiracy, so they pulled that. And then they found the other one. They pulled all my channels. They said, "You're attempting to evade our ban." And they want to ban you. Like, if you really play by the rules, yeah, I don't think you're ever supposed to have more than one YouTube channel. I think it's one per person per lifetime. Same with Twitter. I mean, that's foreign to me. You know, we operate this thing like a hydra with hundreds of heads. Well, I'd say a few dozen heads and then lots of neck stumps. I mean, they keep hacking away at us, but it doesn't stop us. Obi Ninja says, "IPS for the win." Joined by Matt33. All right, I think our numbers are approaching critical raft, which is what we're working on consolidating here. Critical raft is, let's get all of the original, all Infinite Plane Society subscribers onto one YouTube channel. And if you go on YouTube, you can now choose your handle. My handle is Infinite Plane Society. And that is a safe channel, separate from everything else. It's quarantined. And I only go there to draw pictures and talk about things. In fact, today, I recorded an 8-minute video and I clipped off 3 minutes because I recognized I was treading into murky waters. But if I keep that safe, it'll be a permanent beacon. It's called Tim Osman Uncensored, ironically self-censored, to remain uncensored. But I'm not necessarily censored here at all, just so you know. We can sacrifice these channels left and right. Our main base is ips.monster and always will be. We're not YouTube or Twitch or DLive centric. I mean, they should all pay us for streaming on their platforms. All right, to continue, we have Citizen Z in the chat. Look, if anybody wants to call in, also joined by Benton. Appreciate everyone here who's receiving the text alerts. It's one of the most rapid ways to reconstitute our raft. And let's see, today we talked about, on the Tim Osman Uncensored, we talked about Madonna drinking water and how it's outraged people. And I think she's paying people to care. Anyway, I watched it, and it wasn't a real video. It was more like a photo montage to the tune of the Stooges' "I Want to Be Your Dog." And it wasn't all that outrageous. But she's been making strange and oddball videos for a long time. And someone sent me a message about Madonna, and I thought this was interesting. Something about her mask. Here it is. Shout out to the Juice. "Are you live tonight?" Jay Dyer said he talked to Madonna's former bodyguard. Apparently she has this mask that she wears anytime she's on camera. Not doubting she's an Adrena junkie, though. Right. The mask. I'd been thinking about this. You know, we know about deep fake technology, not the digital stuff, but the masks that are hyper realistic. And I thought, if I was an older celebrity, let's say I was 70 or something and I wanted to look 60, instead of going through cosmetic surgeries, maybe I would just buy a mask of my younger self and wear it in public. Anyway, I had this thought that Kathy Griffin was doing this. I saw this video of her, and it looked like she was wearing a mask, but it was obviously her. But I saw what appeared to be a seam, and I thought, maybe this is the new way to look young, to preserve your looks for the camera. That perhaps Madonna's wearing a mask of like a 2010 version of herself, and it's just stretched over her face. All right, continuing. And oh, let me go ahead and ask this. If you any of you know here, just write it in the chat. And I plan to do a few things here in the near future, as far as like first callers, gift for the first caller. I have some keychains, stickers, etc. But let me throw this out there. What does Madonna, Ghislaine Maxwell and Madonna, what do they have in common? Well, no, let me add in Princess Diana. Princess Diana, Ghislaine Maxwell, and Madonna. What do these three have in common? And you wouldn't think they would have much in common. You know, Princess Diana, Ghislaine Maxwell, maybe they might have crossed paths, but Madonna, how does she get in the mix here? But they all share something in common. Salty Siren says she's definitely using a mask and a filter on top of the mask. Right, the filtering is pretty clear and evident. And look, I'm not knocking. These celebrities do what they have to do to compete, and it's difficult to compete. And the fact that she's on page 6 in TMZ, if anything, she's either a genius at marketing or she's paying them to pay attention. And that's my theory. I think that Madonna drinking water from a dog bowl is a fake scandal. You know how many people on TikTok would eat dog food on camera to be on page 6? Like 90% of the TikTokers. Tyrone McCloskey says Diana and Ghislaine are the same person. Go to POM. Diana South guesses right. JFK Jr. Yes. Ghislaine Maxwell, Madonna, and Princess Diana all had affairs with JFK Jr., which seems like a contradiction or a conflict of interest here, where he's on the one hand he's believed to be Q and he's trying to save the children, but then he's shacking up with the main trafficker. Princess Diana, yeah, I guess that kind of makes sense. Unless Princess Diana is actually David Furnish, as some have posited. But leaving that aside, the Madonna connection, adrenochrome junkie, what's she doing hanging out with the guy that's going to stop the elite from drinking the chrome? It just doesn't make JFK Jr. look like such a good savior after all, which is probably why he's not going to be on the VP ticket here. I think they're going for Kanye or MTG. Kevin Mooring says all Illuminati. That's also true. It's got to be. You know, there's a thing on Twitter that they just stopped where you could pay $8 and you get a blue check. And apparently this sort of you buy your verification has created havoc for a few different companies like Eli Lilly. Somebody verified a fake version of their Twitter account and said we're giving away like free insulin, and it caused their stock to drop. They lost billions over a fake blue check deep fake tweet. Anyway, Jesus. Twitter.com/@Jesus. Jesus has a blue check. And I'm like, I'm pretty sure JFK Jr. is behind that account. Portal Complex says, congratulations to Sean Penn and his plaque on the sidewalk of Kyiv. Yeah, I saw that Sean Penn gave his Oscar to a superior actor. And it's a huge act. And if any of you have any doubts as to whether or not what we saw about Ukraine is real or not, the number one illusion warfare correspondent alive right now, Les Luthor, has exploded that whole myth. And I'll go through some of that here shortly. We will get to that tonight. Yeah, Jesus is verified. And here's the thing. After the company, Eli Lilly or whatever, lost their money, Musk pulled the plug on it. You can no longer buy a blue check. I was like, wow, it's that easy? I was going to buy a few blue checks. I was already coming up with some plans. But yeah, here we go. I'm pretty sure this is JFK Jr. This is twitter.com/Jesus. Who has 2 thumbs up and verified? Yep, he has. Let me see how many followers he has. I mean, it is blue checked. 811,000. Pretty new. And it doesn't specify parody. And if you don't specify parody, you get banned. And this shows that this has got to be the real one. It's just a question is, who is it? Is it JFK Jr. or is it? Yeah, the blue check verified. I don't have it either. To me, the blue check just means you're pledged to the beast. You're in the Blue Lodge. You're basically in the club. It's like the opposite of trust. Like I think it was Mark Cuban was complaining to Musk. He's like, "Wait, how will I know who to trust now?" As far as the blue checks, like it's a crisis for him. He doesn't know who to trust. He's like, "The sources I've chosen to trust." I mean, that line of thinking is just so foreign to me. What do you mean sources you've chosen to trust? You outsource your critical thinking? How'd you get into the triple comma club? That's what they call it, the billionaires. All right, I want to get back on track. I had a lot of things I want to get into, but let me bring this up. Shout out to Human Vibrations was talking about JFK, not JFK, RFK. You know RFK, who was, well, executed by Saran. Interestingly enough, the photographer who photographed the death of Robert F. Kennedy, his name is Richard Drew. He also photographed the falling man on 9/11. Here's the tweet from Human Vibration. This is Twitter. The falling man, an unforgettable story. He appears relaxed, hurling through the air. He appears to be comfortable in the grip of unimaginable motion. He does not appear to be intimidated by gravity's divine suction or by what awaits him. This man was not identified. And this is a thread from this Twitter feed. Fun fact, the photographer responsible for the falling man was no stranger to history in the making. 1968, Richard Drew found himself in the kitchen of the Ambassador Hotel in Los Angeles just as Bobby Kennedy was sneaking through and right before he was shot in the head. Richard Drew's jacket was spattered with Kennedy's blood. Imagine that. He jumped on a table and shot pictures of Kennedy with his eyes open. Now imagine this. I mean, this is probably what would happen. Like if somebody shoots you, sadly, the people nearby are going to pull out their phones and they're going to take pictures. They're going to record it. And that's what Richard Drew did. This guy gets shot in the head and he jumps back and starts snapping pictures. Like he catches him as he's falling to his death. The 42-year-old falls to his death. She goes on her post. In most American newspapers, the photograph that Richard Drew took of the falling man ran once and never again. Forced to defend themselves against charges, they exploited the man's death, stripping him of dignity. Now, what I went into, my response to it here, and there are some interesting connections between the posture of the falling man and the classical representation of the falling man, or the hanged man rather, in the tarot deck. But one of the more interesting connections to me is that the image itself, the photograph Richard Drew took, is owned by the Rocket Man, Elton John. Like Elton John has a collection of pictures that are just macabre. He says, "I collect for the beauty, not the value." And he says, "I have The Falling Man by Richard Drew. It is one of the most beautiful and powerful and upsetting images ever." All right, well, this guy likes, what, snuff? But what are the odds this guy would be photographing both? To me, this is just great storytelling, and it's the same storytellers. He gets the same, these are agents in place. Commenter says Twitter is supposedly worth $8 billion, and they rolled out $8 blue check subscription. 8-8. Interesting. Yeah, we'll get into some of that. There was a lot of interesting symbolism around 11-8 and the whole blood moon, the ultra blood MAGA moon. It didn't turn out to be the red tsunami or the red wave that Dr. Joe Rogan was suggesting was going to be. And many of you may have noticed that Donald Trump is being dumped on quite heavily right now. Like he's being blamed for what happened at the midterms. That this is some kind of way of, I guess, getting rid of him. There's a lot of people. New York Post, a lot of the people who catered to Trump's base, they're just turning on Trump. And it's interesting to watch. And we'll follow that as it develops. By the way, today, 11/11, Bruce Wayne died. Rest in peace, Kevin Conroy, who was well known for the legendary voice of Bruce Wayne in Batman that went on cartoons, video games, and animation movies of The Dark Knight. Now, again, the significance there, Bruce Wayne, of course, is the one who founded, well, Bruce Wayne's grandfather founded the Skull and Bone Society, if you go by this lore. And, of course, you can't separate Batman and Joker from the major psyops of our time. Boston bombing, 9/11, coronavirus, and whatever's coming next. It's all there. Just pointing it out. Interesting timing, I guess. 11/11, 2022. I don't have any specific fixation on these dates, but the elite do. And the reason 9/11 happened on that day likely is its relationship to the dog star Sirius or the New Year, something along those lines. Yeah, you can't get in. Look, if you want to verify, Twitter paused paid verifications. They paused it. Because, of course, here it is. Fake blue check costs at Eli Lilly billions. The account used the name Eli Lilly & Co. and the official Eli Lilly logo. And they tweeted, quote, "We're excited to announce insulin is free now." The tweet gained more than several hundred retweets, thousands of likes, and it caused the stock value to drop. That's what happened. It's Trump's fault. Musk's new blue check system costs billions after fake free insulin tweet. Now, I have some Alex Jones news because Alex Jones's assets have been frozen. Like, he's not going to be able to live off anything but his storable food items and neighbor's ass. Like, if you live near Alex Jones, you get to watch it. Alex Jones and Roger Stone are concerned that a lot of Republicans didn't bother voting because now they think all elections are rigged. Now, here's my question. I thought you're here fighting, tip of the spear, fighting the beast, and now you're telling people to vote. Like, you guys are depressed by low voter turnout. The anti-government people are actually big government people in disguise. It's like, you're not supporting Big Brother.
We'll need to stop just counting on somebody else to do it.
I actually think, unfortunately, the results last night add to a growing frustration. What disappoints me is the number of people who tell me that after the last election, they just tuned out anything political and stopped paying attention. I mean, their attitude is, it's broken, it cannot be fixed. I'm going to go to my kid's Little League game and hope that they're not letting boys play girls sports and vice versa. So
well, that's right. You can't hide from this, folks. They're going to destroy us. You can no longer.
Anyway, I get bored by blue pill politics. I recognize it for the game that it is. And it just kind of strikes me as interesting how at the end of it, they're just leading you to the voting booth. And it's pretty consistent. I'm listening to Steve Bannon War Room and Alex Jones is on every other day. And I'm like, this is just an extension of the world stage. They don't deconstruct the psyops for this reason. They're part of this infrastructure. But most of you already know that. But what's more, they are freezing his assets. I mean, what would happen if they really give some of these families trillions of dollars? But Alex Jones, of course, has said that he's going to fight it, even if they put a gun to his head. He's pretty adamant that he's not going to stop, but they're going to freeze his assets. It should get interesting. We have a few more Q drops. Nobody's impressed. The Q drops put an end to the endless. They're actually being criticized for the bad poetry. And of course, Q hasn't been identified by the media for some reason. They still question, who is it? Is it Ron Watkins? Is it Jim Watkins? Like, when do people, when are they going to just ask themselves? When So I'm going to say we need to get to the bottom of this. Who can we blame for everything? And if you don't know who Q is, we do. It's the person operating George News, and he's being protected. Every major, I would say, every major magazine and news site that's covered him has kind of protected him. If you look back to 2018, just a little bit of a history here. After the David Hogg story went viral, and David Hogg, of course, crisis actor GOAT, according to Tim Osman, and he really is. But ever since then, this is the thing. He went viral as a crisis actor because of MGTV. That was the name of the channel. He started it. MGTV really started the crisis actor meme blowing up outside of just the fringe of conspiracy circles. Most people don't like auto hoaxers, or they didn't at the time. They were the ones calling out the actors. They wanted to believe these things were real. Anyway, this channel MGTV had a trending video that exposed David Hogg as an actor from some previous reel. He was on the news 6 months prior at some beach. Anyway, the name of the channel, MGTV, was deleted in every single article from New York Times, Washington Post, Vice. They all deleted the name of the channel. Nobody can trace who was the guy that doxed David Hogg. And I'm wondering, how did he get that? How did he get all these, like even Forbes? Anybody who covered that story deleted the name of the channel. And I went to the Wayback Machine in every instance, and I can prove it. Just pointing it out here because that is the person that we believe is Q, and we believe he's being protected. All right, let's roll on here. Just kind of dropping another Q posting. He says, it's just a bunch of questions. I mean, it's annoying. It's like the Riddler. Who are the silent thieves? Why are they manipulating you? How are they stealing your wealth? What is inflation? It's like a pop quiz. Then he says 1913 Q. 1913 is obviously a reference to gold. I mean, just a bunch of Z's, bored. All right, let's go into this. Les Luthor, Illusion Warfare Report, the TikTok war. 13,000 of the most viewed TikTok videos showing, quote, war in Ukraine were fake, using the same exact audio overlay of gunfire attached to old footage, training footage, video game footage, etc. The mainstream media quietly admits this. This is a great thread here. Again, this is Les Luthor, Illusion Warfare correspondent. If you're in chat, or you're in the Discord chat, I'm going to drop a link there to Les Luthor. I highly recommend that you follow this channel. Retweet, save, screen cap, because at some point they're probably going to delete him. They had to come up with a new term for people who fact-checked these big hoaxes. They call us disaster trolls. In fact, there's another guy, his name is Richard Drew, I believe, who's out there fact-checking, visiting supposed victims of these events, and he's probably going to be given the Alex Jones treatment. Portal Complex says, Les is pure. Oh yes, we've actually had him on as a guest. Unfortunately, Zoom wasn't premium, and I got cut off at 30 minutes, but we'll have him on again very soon. I'm going to have to reach out to him. But I posted a link to his account if you want to follow it. Another reason to go to ips.monster. Like if you're listening on the audio stream and you're wondering how to get in on the chat or find any of the links to anything that we talk about, go to ips.monster and click on the chat button. You'll find all of these links. Okay, here's the thread. Let me go ahead and play a couple of clips here.
Again, this is a first that so much intel is made available to the public.
Well, we've always done some of that, but this is an industrial strength application of that concept. And I suspect it's a result of some very bright folks on the National Security Council staff, perhaps at state, CIA, and so forth. But it has been quite striking. And of course, then you also have...
They're discussing how this war is very public. It's not just hearsay, we're not waiting to hear news, but it's all over TikTok. And that's probably one of the reasons why it's so unbelievable.
The advent of the TikTok war. This is the first time where you can really follow real time and watch and see what Russian forces look like, where they're deployed.
Now, this is interesting too, because I've been saying for some time here that the democratization of the means of producing media and reporting has made it very difficult for them to maintain these illusions, and that's just a matter of time until people start swarming these supposed psyops and fact-checking things. And we've already kind of made moves in these directions. That's what Empty Hospitals was about. Film Your Hospitals. We were like, hey, why are we going to just sit back and let the media tell us when we are the media? And that's why I issue press passes. If you want a press pass, go to infiniteplane.media. I will issue one out to you. In fact, if you are waiting on a press pass and it hasn't arrived, I have a shipment going out tomorrow. I'll send you tracking information, and that goes for anybody who's waiting for anything, including artwork, etc. But let me continue. He's talking about this being the first TikTok war.
And watch and see what Russian forces look like, where they're deployed, and all the rest of that. And, you know, I thought in my mind, maybe Putin could have restricted these areas, but he has forces in so many different areas of Belarus, Russia, and so forth, that he really can't restrict the citizens from their own communities. So you see that, and of course, Twitter and other social media applications, which have been very helpful to those of us just looking at open source intelligence real time and seeing what is being assembled.
Open source intelligence real time. It sounds like Infinite Plane Radio. Anyway, that's David Petraeus. This is from Les Luther. Says, quote, the go-to clown expert on how to continuously lose a war is appearing on news outlets and inserting the idea that this is a TikTok war. Now listen to this. Perception management, creating a false reality. According to UK-based Center for Information Resilience, 90% of the TikTok videos coming from the areas allegedly under violent occupation in February were actually everyday normal activities. Walking the dog, cooking, parties, etc. Again, 90% of the TikTok footage from these areas that were being bombed or whatever were just business as usual videos. How do you explain that? And there's more. Fake live streams. Someone using dramatic video from an old conflict, military drills, realistic video games, adding fake audio of gunfire and explosions, starting a live stream, fooling large audiences, and these clips end up on TikTok. CGI video game images, fake aerial battles, fighter jets being shot were particularly popular. This is again from Les Luther, Lezluthor. Those videos that flooded TikTok were from popular video games like Call of Duty and Arma 3. The government and mainstream media did nothing to highlight this to the public. They love to let you dupe yourselves. Like during 2020, how many times did you see literal dummies, simulation training dolls on hospital beds being ventilated, like all the time? We repeatedly noticed this, and I thought, there is a pandemic among these rubber training dummies. I don't see any real, but I see a lot of these fake things. I'm just saying the news media doesn't say these are fake, and if you don't pause it, you wouldn't know. Like you could just look at the screen, it blows past really fast, and you wouldn't know you're looking at a bunch of dummies. It requires people like us, fact checkers, disaster trolls. Okay, here's another one. This is from Les Luther again. One video viewed 24 million times on TikTok shows what appears to be a soldier throwing a grenade into an armored vehicle. And you know what's crazy is that you could take this video and show it to any believer and they'll say, yeah, I believe it. Well, the footage was taken from a YouTube airsoft match. It's not even, look, this is how fake it is. They don't even have to fake anything. People are faking it themselves. How is this even happening? There's no meaningful distinction between the movies, the entertainment, the video games, and the news. Not at this point. And then you have this, more from Les Luther. Again, illusion warfare correspondent. This is auto-hoaxing taken to the world stage. This is really next level. He's doing a great service to reality at this time. Videos from previous conflicts such as Syria, Libya, Chechnya have flooded TikTok, falsely passed off as breaking news from Ukraine. Whoever's doing this, quote, intelligence service, simply overlays dates and banners onto the old footage and they upload to social media. I kind of see what they're doing here. It's like create your own reality. They're flooding the zone and letting us piece it together. And of course, the people who don't critically consume information are suckered right in. All right, going through some comments. Not Shocked says TikTok theater of war. Yep, Kevin Mooring, cardboard and plywood gun cutouts. Yeah, there were actually plywood vehicles that were meant to look like surface-to-air missile launch vehicles, and they were all made out of wood, painted olive drab. And the newspaper, front page, these are being deployed to trick the Russians into wasting missiles. Like you're telling me that they're going to launch multi-million-dollar missiles at props and not know? Like you don't think that the Russians are reading the newspapers? Hey guys, let's not launch these because their newspaper says these things are all just props. And then if you really think about it, what are the odds that only one side uses decoys? Like they both use decoys. It's on both sides. And when you really look at it, to me it just seems like it's decoy illusion warfare on both sides, and it's against the civilians. And we wouldn't have any way of fact checking this were it not for social media. They don't have the closed movie set they used to have. And that's the thing about these psychological operations that happen in the schools or wherever they happen. These are closed movie sets. And when they have observers, it's no longer closed. It compromises everything. And I believe this is the reason why YouTube doesn't let you live stream unless you have 1,000 subs from your mobile device. They made that change after Brenton Tarrant and the Christchurch shooting massacre that he live streamed, but the 1,000 subscriber barrier is meant to keep people like you and I from potentially disrupting a major psychological operation by broadcasting it to any sizable audience. You can't get to 1,000 unless they've already vetted you and they find out that you're not going to be a disruptor. Echo Charlie says, I bet real penguins would eat caviar too. I tried to go visit the local penguins recently, but they said there's an avian flu going around. All right, let us continue here. I'm just going through Les Luther. I mean, this is so good. This is one of the best threads that I found, and I did put it in the chat. Military parade footage. A video of Ukrainian tanks falsely presented as if they're on their way to defend the city from a Russian invasion. 9 million views. Now, do you remember a couple of months ago, there was an individual who was affiliated with the James Webb $10 billion space telescope, the one that you can't get a refund on if you find out it's a hoax because it's a million miles away? Yeah, that thing there. Somebody associated with that presented the world with what he said was a star 4.2 light years away. Well, this star turned out to be a slice of salami, and it went viral. This space salami, mistaken for a star. Now, because they trust the source, they just absorbed it as a fact. Many of these people were so moved to it, moved by tears, they shared it. They wrote stories about it. Look what our $10 billion telescope did. Isn't science great? Turns out it was a big fat hoax, and he had to apologize. Now, was he apologizing for a hoax, or was he mocking the victims of something he's a part of? I'm thinking that's the case. But my point is, millions of people didn't know it was fake. The only people who weren't fooled were the people who've learned to question NASA. Doesn't mean flat earthers, doesn't mean anything. It just means people who've learned to question and fact check, cross-reference, and again, in this case, they were vindicated. The only people who weren't fooled by the space chorizo were flat earthers. So laugh at them if you want to. Anyway, 9 million people were fooled, cheering, crying at their screens, like, look, Ukraine will protect itself, let's go Ukraine. 9 million people. And yeah, this was just a parade. And this is just Cywar. There's more. Military activity from 2014 being presented as current. Video claims to show Ukrainian and Russian forces fighting outside a block of flats. 14 million views. It's actually old footage of a training drill. Many of the TikTok videos are in fact training drills. And I thought this was the case. In fact, I think they use drills to record footage to be presented as news later. Sleepy Random says, where's the outer space pizza? Kevin Mooring says, Trump said this Tuesday he has a big announcement. Oh yes, on the 15th, Donald Trump will either announce that he's been president the whole time, surprise, and JFK Jr. is going to jump out of a birthday cake, or he's going to announce that he's running again, probably with Kanye or Marjorie Taylor Greene. Now, drills are how they operate. Drills are how they get the actors in place. This is how they acclimate the public to these things actually being real. I mean, I actually think that I was more or less a Psy-War operative when I was in the military, because my job, of course, had to do with nuclear, biological, chemical decon, making sure that everyone in the unit had a mask that sealed, that they were prepared to deal with nuclear fallout, how to respond. And my point is, you have the entire military trained to respond to something. Everybody just assumes it's real. It's real because they all believe it. They all train for it. And I'm thinking, if it doesn't exist, then it makes sense that you would want to have that particular job as a specialty and make it a part of every unit, because it doesn't have to exist if everybody believes it exists. It's just like they simulate it into reality. Robert Bell says Trump Z, 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 Z. Yeah, a lot of people are having Trump fatigue. But DeSantis has literally copied Trump's body language, facial expressions, how he writes. He does the accordion thing with his hands. I'm surprised he hasn't copied the hairstyle. Nothing against Ron DeSantis. He's one of the more sensible people on the world stage. And of course, you can't let people forget the insanity of 2020. Don't let the mask Karens off. Don't let them off because it's in the past. It's not actually in the past. If it was up to them, it would have been permanent. Anyway, there are so many things here, but one response to Les Luthor's work is, it's always been this way. And that's the thing. They've always faked things. They've always faked the news. They've always had crisis actors. But we didn't really start noticing until recently. And this has been enabled through social media, what the mass media actually calls the infodemic. Whenever they're talking about disinformation, the DHS says the new weapon of mass destruction is actually misinformation. Misinformation is the leading cause of death. When they say this, it's because they've lost control. The genie's out of the bottle and they're trying to repair it. This is a holy war. They're attempting to get rid of non-canonical texts as they consolidate the new Bible, which is the television's function. The television had function as the de facto world state church Bible, and it's kind of been fractured. This is something of a neo-reformation, but they're putting it back together fast. I mean, outside of those of us who've gone full off-world stage in our critique of media, they've got total control. I mean, that's why they have Alex Jones being burned at the stake right now. Robert Bell says Trump Fetterman 2024. Yeah, I don't understand anything about this anymore. None of these individuals were all that attractive to me as candidates. Candidates for what? What do they stand for? It's semi-fascism versus fascism. Speaking of, the term fascism is overused, but I think it's interesting to note how much PPE resembled a fashion statement and a uniform more than an actual medical device. If you think about its actual use, I don't recall anybody throwing their PPE into red biohazardous waste containers, which you would think you would have to do. My point is, I think it was a fashion statement, and they used fashion to win over people through mob coercion, and it worked. Sleepy Random says Fetterman is one of the sharpest Democrat debaters. Facts. Yeah, I saw him. I'm like, wow, they've really elevated their discourse, the Democrats. I guess the bar's been kind of low ever since Biden, kind of bumbling around, but it's great to see. Let's see. Not Shock says, why do they call them acting troops? Military troops. Good point. The theater, was it theater of war? And of course, all you do is drills when you're in the military. It's just drill after drill after drill. Kevin Mooring says, I posted the Les interview in Discord. Yeah, again, many of you may not know. This is why I'm making the point to point this out to anybody who's just on audio. You want to go to ips.monster and subscribe. We've been targeted for censorship. They've obviously deplatformed us, but we're going to be back on all the major podcasting platforms again here within the next 24 hours. You just have to keep searching. Like if your feed stopped updating, it's because they killed the source. But there are other ones. You're staring at a neck. Like I said, we're a hydra with 80 neck stumps and 20 heads. You just got to research Infinite Plane Radio. All right, let's continue. R. Cook says lobotomies are so hot right now. Joined by Clockwork 113, bringing the popcorn. I'm doing my best to avoid the political clown show, but it's important to know, where the world stage is at. I'm going to read a message from Tim Osman, spelled with an S. This is the guy who believes that the Earth is a giant CGI ball. Quote, I will never forgive you for introducing me to David Hogg, one of the biggest internet shills on the earth next to Mark Sargent. Who would have known his humble beginnings in Kelly on the beach, then at a school shooting, and now with March for Our Lives, BLM, getting young people to vote socialist. Insane, bro. He might be the shill goat. The greatest of all time. I agree. It's like a time traveler. He didn't exist. He stepped off the screen, out of the nightly news, into reality. With die-ins in supermarkets. That was genius. Like, look, the adults don't care about school shootings because they're not there. They don't see it. It's out of sight, out of mind. So let's play dead in the grocery stores and then say, you did this to me. And that's exactly what they did. They played dead. They piled up in supermarkets and they had signs. Your Second Amendment murdered me. And that's probably why so many of the fake shootings have moved from the schools to the supermarkets, like King Soopers. Do you remember the King Soopers on 322? Was it 2020? This King Soopers shooting, Super Day for a PSYOP 322 Skull and Bone Society date. It was King Superstore 33 in Boulder, Colorado, 33 union workers. A totally fake event. It's kind of interesting to see how they were crossing agendas. They were like, here these people are going into the supermarket. Many of them were getting their COVID-19 shots there. And they end up getting an AR-15 shot. Like, it was kind of combining agendas. And the shooter was doing so in retaliation for the Christchurch shooting. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. All of these shootings, they all exist in the same fictional universe. Kind of like Marvel Comics. Like, you have different characters, different comic book writers, but they all participate in the same fictional universe and play by the same rules, and they all know each other. And those who aren't in that universe don't exist. Peter W. says, shootings have been quiet lately. Yeah, lately the thing has been tramplings. You had the trampling at the soccer game, and then the trampling in South Korea at the Halloween party, where you had synchronized CPR to staying alive. They didn't even turn the music off. It was just the music still blaring, and a lot of people thought it was a dance, a choreographed dance. Like they were all going to jump up, all the dead bodies, and do the Michael Jackson Thriller dance. That's what I was waiting for. But that was fake. The soccer game one was fake. The tear gas was fake. There was no tears, not from distraught witnesses, nor from actual tear gas. And in any of the footage where you see people being carried out, there are 2 or 3 cameramen following them, taking pictures. That was a drill presented as real. Now, I pointed out how nukes were a thing, Armageddon, Judgment Day, the West is about to be nuked, Hunt for Red October, Satan 2, Putin's going to kill us all. And then Kanye comes out and he makes some statements about Jewish media mafia, and now nobody's talking about nukes anymore. That just sort of disappeared. And now we have the Pelosi attack thing. I think that kind of wiped Kanye off the map a bit. No one's talking about the Pelosi thing anymore. And there's not much to say. I think we've covered pretty much everything. His name being the Pepe, the Pape, yeah, that's just too obvious. But that's kind of cleared Kanye off the decks. And right now it's midterms, I guess. But it's just like they recognize the public has an attention span collectively, and they have to phase out every major event. Every major thing that's the thing of the day, poof, gone the next day. When's the nuke coming? I don't know, but we can't rule it out. It's still a big part of the predictive programming. And predictive programming is exactly that. It's not them wishful thinking. Whenever you see predictive programming, it's because it's preparing you for an actual part of the script. And the next part of the script, if you ask me, has got to do with this nuclear winter situation. Okay, let us continue. I figured also that they were probably putting the brakes on certain psyops until after the midterms. I mean, they really did kind of pack everything in July. We had the July 4th shooting. We had all kinds of assassination attempts. All right, Madonna licks water out of a dog bowl in embarrassing new video. Look, I don't think it's embarrassing. I'm not going to jump on the bandwagon and just say she's too old for this or whatever. I'm like, no, this is typical for what she's done. And it's no better, no worse than what I've seen on TikTok. People will do anything for clicks. There were all kinds of TikTokers faking all kinds of things last year. We had TikTok crisis shakers. Now this is interesting. Yesterday I talked about history repeating itself, and I was pointing out how if you look at these cloud formations on the globe as presented from NASA in 2002 and 2007, you'll find the exact same cloud formations. And either they're faking the globe from space the way they present it, or, if that's not the case, or history's repeating, like literally, even the clouds. Well, check this out. And this is from Jacob Bartol official. History repeating. Hurricane Nicole 43 days after Ian. Same as Charlie and Jean in 2004. He says here, a perfect example of weather control comes from Tropical Storm Nicole, upgraded to a hurricane, making landfall in Florida 43 days after Hurricane Ian. This pattern was observed in 2004 when Jean made landfall 43 days after Charlie. Even their paths are identical. Quote, of course, it's man-made, as most weather catastrophes are these days. Everything's planned and executed by the numbers. And we are looking again at two hurricanes crossing paths. These pairs occur 18 years apart, and the storms are spaced 43 days apart. What does this mean? I don't know 100%. Does it mean that they are controlling the weather? Or does it mean that they're controlling the media that reports the weather? Or a mixture of both? What do you think? AK All Day 2323 says that Dog Bowl has Murpies now. Oh yeah. Embarrassing for dogs, says Robert Bell. Look, it's because it was it's an Iggy Pop Stooges song. I Want to Be Your Dog. Like, I think in context, what she did, it was more like a punk rock performance thing. It wasn't some kind of degradation BDSM, which was what I thought it was initially. And I was like, you have to go there for shock value? That's not even shocking. Like, it's not shocking at all if you haven't paid attention to what's going on. If she wants to be really controversial, she should just go read at a library. You'll get, to kids, you'll get all kinds of armed protesters. A little bit of fact checking here. Yep, Wednesday, September 28th, 2022 to November the 10th, 43 days. August 14th, 2004 to September 26th, 43 days. Anybody here have any idea of what that could mean? I'm not going to go too deep into the numerology, but the poster here does, and I put the link in minds.com. Salty Siren says it's the dog god reference with the Madonna, a ritual. Hey, good call. We've been talking about the significance of the dog star, which everybody inadvertently worships on New Year's. And that's probably not a coincidence. Okay, here's some info on Alex Jones's assets. Again, warning to Alex Jones's neighbors. InfoWars host Alex Jones was temporarily blocked from transferring any assets or spending money other than for ordinary living expenses by the judge overseeing the Sandy Hooker defamation trial in Connecticut. Unbelievable. Yep. Temporary block from transferring any assets. State court judge Barbara Bellis, who oversaw the case, in which a jury ordered him to pay $1 billion for spreading lies, issued a freeze order over concerns he was looting his own estate and hiding assets through a series of shell companies owned by family members. With the exception of ordinary living expenses, the defendant Alex Jones is not to transfer, encumber, dispose, or move his assets out of the U.S. until further order of the court. Now, what does this mean? Ordinary living expenses. According to, what I'm very curious to see what are they going to do? How are they going to attempt to cut him off? But jurors awarded 5 families and a Federal Bureau of Investigation agent $965 million in damages to compensate them for emotional distress. I'm telling you, snowflakes have all the power. If you can cry on camera, they'll give you everything. You cry on camera, you become the face of a tragedy, you get a big payday. Universal basic income for AJ? Right. Now, why do their hurt feelings matter more than ours or anyone else's? And this is all predicated, of course, on the idea that they were being stalked and harassed. Well, charge those people. Okay, let me continue. I want to find out if there's anything else here. The families asked Bellis to order a complete accounting of Jones's assets, which he's refused to provide. His ex-wife was out there saying something about he's got paint cans full of money. Anyway, frozen assets. Let us continue. The Pope said, we need to change the operating system that humanity generated. No, this is not the Pope. Who is this? This is Rabbi Nerel. Many people fear that humans have destroyed the ecology of Eden on Earth. We need to change the operating system that humanity generated that's downgrading God's creation. We need to switch from greed, short-term thinking, and individualistic behavior to altruism, long-term thinking. Yeah, the war on the individual is ultimately what World War III has been about. And in my view, it was actually declared on 3/11/2020. I'm not I guess I am. I'm something of a hopium addict. Like, I don't believe it's real. I don't want it to be real, but I'm addicted to the hopium that people are addicted to. Like, I don't believe it's real. I'm a collector of this stuff. Like, I want the stuff printed out. This is an image of a very serious looking Donald Trump staring out into the distance, and then beneath him you have these soldiers with their guns out like he's ordering these troops. This was posted 2 days ago by Galactic Jack on Twitter. Mass arrests were made throughout the United States for 36 hours, and they ended at 4 p.m. on Tuesday, November the 1st. Again, mass arrests. And this gets shared. Look, 207 people retweeted this. 776 hearts. People see the image of Trump and soldiers, and they hear about mass arrests, and they get all teary-eyed. Salty Siren says, Alex Jones the other day said he has less than $100,000 in the bank. Weird because his buddies boast spending $50,000 for the weekend. I know what you're referring to. Yes. Marcus Goldfinch from George News bragged about partying it up with Alex Jones and Joe Rogan, claiming that on an average weekend in Vegas they spend $70,000. I have the emails. Angst G says, will Steve Bannon ever see the inside of a jail cell? No, not at all. He's appealing. He's still out. I listened to his podcast. And right now it's all copium, trying to deal with the loss. Random says, Trump has been mass arresting people for years now. He has been. And they've been replacing them with deep fakes. I've seen the list of mass arrests. I sometimes see the people who've been executed. Like in 2020, the QAnoners were saying every time a celebrity gets a shot, it's code. They're getting the shot at Guantanamo. I mean, you can excuse QAnon and laugh at it, but at the end of the day, it's just another fundamentalist religion that delights in watching its enemies face judgment. Got this tweet or this Facebook post from Lynn Ertel. The caption here says, don't try and tell me this shit ain't real. And it's an image of a chemtrail blanketed sky, or condensation trails, or geoengineering, or HARP, or stratospheric injections, or what? I mean, what is it? I don't care to get into a chemtrail debate. I'm looking for clarity. And whenever someone wants to talk about it, I ask them, what is the source? Are you going to assert commercial airlines or other? And when you get into other, then we can trace that and find out how likely is it that there's some other kind of craft. And I'm just trying to get some specifics. And I find generally the chemtrail believer will deflect and say, oh, it's geoengineering. Like, okay, you're against geoengineering. Is it worse than climate change? And yes, Sleepy Random says spray it with vinegar. This was a big thing. The Ron Paul supporters used to spray vinegar at the sky to cancel out chemtrails. And apparently it works. I've seen it on camera. Dominic says there's a Bob Saget strand of weed out there. Did Bob Saget really die? Did any of these comedians really die? Do you remember there was a spate of attacks on comedians? Will Smith slapping Chris Rock. Dave Chappelle got attacked. Pete Davidson was being symbolically killed in videos and threatened. You had that other comedian, Heather McDonald, who happens to have Donald Trump's birthday, talked about how she was triple vaxxed and Jesus loves her the most, and she fell and hit her head. Bob Saget supposedly hit his head on the headboard. I mean, how many comedians went down all at the same time? There were a ton of them. And I thought this was code. Like, maybe this is about the death of comedy. Like, some memes go too far. They want you to mask your mind. Because ultimately, it's not about protecting. If you ask me, the whole thing has been about infodemic. I remember at the time saying how, funnily enough, the year before, I was like, look, in 2021, it's going to be mandatory helmets for space junk. And then 2021 comes, and it's like, maybe if you got the inner space junk, you need a helmet. Johnny List said, could it be vitamins they are spraying? Yeah, I think so. Vitamin, aluminum, and barium. Oh, yeah. I go out every morning for a jog, and I get my daily dose. I like to mega dose on it, in fact. And around 6 a.m. when all the planes are leaving, it's the best time. My problem with the whole chemtrail thing is this. I lived near a couple of airports, a military, and then the airport there, the international airport. And it has the best clouds. I go out there to the observation area to watch planes taking off, and it's just beautiful clouds. And I'm like, wait, if these are the things that are dumping the chemtrails everywhere, how come there's never any chemtrails above the airport? Salty Siren says MAGA dose. Oh, like MAGA dose of Kool-Aid. That's probably what's going to spray out of Trump's new, what is it? Trump Force One. What does Trump call his big 737? Trump's Boeing 757. It's going to be spraying MAGA Kool-Aid out the back. Trump Force One. That's what it is. Trump Force One gets a new coat of paint. 228 seats. Very dramatic. He lands, he steps out of this thing. waves, red tie or blue tie, depending on which Trump comes out that day. Q trails, says Random. Right. Ollie Goering says, I think Robin Williams really passed. He was divorced and broke. Right, that could be the story, though. Robin Williams, the comedian, when he died, it corresponded with a Family Guy episode where he commits suicide. He's actually hanging from a door like he did in real life. Look, Family Guy, Robbie Williams. There was definitely some kind of... Here we go. Robin Williams' Family Guy suicide attempt episode airs just before his death. As first reported by the Mirror, BBC Three aired the Family Guy episode that was about Peter Griffin gaining the ability to turn everything into Robin Williams. Yes. Basically, the long and short of it is, you have a Family Guy episode featuring the suicide of Robin Williams, and then he did it. It's not like he watched it and he's like, man, this makes me feel bad about myself. No, this is scripted. This is a psyop. I don't think that he actually died. In fact, recently, and I might even have it in my notes here, recently somebody found what appears to be a very Robin Williams-y looking person. Speaking of death fakers, the crowd who are waiting for JFK to come back are also hopeful that Adolf Hitler is still alive. Apparently in the secret JFK files this has been released. Adolf Hitler is still alive. Now, of course, this document's from like 1963, but that hasn't stopped them from speculating if maybe the 106-year-old JFK will be joined by a 130-year-old Adolf Hitler. Now that would be a ticket there, you know, president and vice president. All right, let's continue. Darn, I wanted to read my tweets, and I was really curious what Mark Dice had to say today, but I'm blocked. Sleepy Random says Family Guy pushed him over the edge. No, the Family Guy also predicted the Boston bombing. Remember the Boston bombing, the guy named Joker? And then you had the Batman response. The SWAT team dressed up like Batman going door to door. But on the Family Guy, he actually detonates 2 bombs. Like, it is exactly what happened at the Boston Hoaxathon. But look, as a rule, there are no coincidences on the world stage. That's why I don't think Trump is, like, literally a rogue. Nor do I think Kanye West is anything other than scripted as being out of bounds. Man found fatally shot in Queens crash was convicted killer, JFK assassination author. Now, I don't know what to make of the story other than it looks like a search engine grab for certain terms. We're getting very close to the anniversary or the hoaxiversary of the death of JFK, and I'm looking forward to this one for a couple of reasons. One, the number 1122, the date 1122, has some tie-ins to some of these villains in the BLM narratives. Like, for example, Derek Chauvin, when he was first released on bail from Hennepin County, it was 11:22 a.m. And then you have the officer who's responsible for the death of Breonna Taylor, the one who falsified the warrant. She's going to be sentenced on 11/22. And then you had the Parkland High shooter who was obsessed with Lee Harvey Oswald, who shot up the parade. And that Lee Harvey Oswald 11/22 reference, it's really standing out to me. So just letting you know, I'm keeping an eye on 11/22. Let's continue. I think I already read this one. The QAnoners have the so-called digital soldiers, which is a term that I believe General Flynn has actually trademarked. Now they are asking God's assistance. This is real Toria Brooke. As multiple social media platforms and the internet have been terrible, I prayed to God to intervene in the digital warfare. I made him a promise I'd read the Bible and make it a priority. What happened? Within 5 minutes, all of the posts about election fraud that wouldn't post before went right through. This is again a digital soldier explaining how God helped post some things about election fraud, but doesn't explain why God didn't grant the red wave. Now here is a clip from Deadpool. A shout out to JT33. I think this is a flat earth reference, not directly, but if you know, you know.
I bet 50 years from now we're best as buddies.
50 years from now, you're very dead. Your entire generation fucked this planet into a coma.
Boom! Spoiler alert.
Planets. 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 Planets.
Nobody says planets like that sarcastically, other than those who know that planets are something of a joke. I watched the latest launch. Bezos didn't 10, but Blue Origin, dude perfect, goes to space. It's pretty unwatchable. It's like a micro documentary. You don't see, here's what you don't see. And look, this is true for every single time you've seen any of these billionaires sending people to space. You don't see continuous footage of more than 3 seconds. It's always jump cut. Like, you could do this. You and your friends could do this. Get a green screen, put it on your wall, have a trampoline there, jump on the trampoline, and then splice together all the footage when you're in midair and go from one person to the other to the other. Just don't record when they're actually bouncing from the bottom. And you could make it look like they're all in the air. And that's pretty much it. Like, I saw the capsule where they simulate the entire launch before they do it. And I'm starting to think that the capsule where the astronauts simulate space travel at Blue Origin is actually one of those birthday party inflatable castles. You know, those inflatable castles that the kids go in and they jump around in? I think that's what they use over at Blue Origin headquarters, and they pass it off as being in space. Cringe perfect, says David A. Pryor. Oh yes. Oh yes. I mean, I would play a clip. You could take his word for it, cringe perfect. I'll play a clip. Maybe. I mean, yeah, it's pretty bad. If you've seen one launch, you've seen them all. The point of it is the people who go to space aren't people like you and me. These are people who are completely hardwired into the system. Like, in my view, if you're not an actor, you can't be an actor-not. And I'm not a good enough actor. I couldn't go to space. News to me. Peter W. says, Tim, Jim Fetzer resubmitted his Sandy Hook case to the Supreme Court this past week. Very good news. Jim Fetzer has not backed down from calling it a DHS drill that has duped the world. Jim Fetzer is holding the line. Tim and Vic 131 says, better late than never. Tim, great to hear you back on air. Yeah, we were only briefly interrupted because we were cut off from more than 4,000 or 5,000 subscribers on the podcasting platforms. I didn't see that one coming, but I'm glad it happened. I'm glad it happened because you wouldn't want to build a big platform that could be taken down so easily. And I'm glad I found out at 4,000 stubs instead of 40,000 or 50,000. And what we are building now is real. We have a solid ground zero. And, you know, whoever was behind the censorship, what you're doing is obviously unethical and wrong. But my objective is to find out, you know, who's really behind censoring the channel, who fraudulently files DMCA copyright takedown notices. And I'm not interested in suing people. It's a waste of time. And most of these trolls aren't collectible. What are they going to do? Pay you in pizza pockets? Used video game consoles? Like, I'm just like, I want to interview them. If you're a censor, if you're a snowflake, you know, I want to pick what's left of a brain. Infinite Plane Radio.
Yeah, it's Lynn again.
Hey, what's up,
You said
Lynn?
you put the call out.
Yes, actually, I did.
The notice out.
I put the notice out. I'm glad to hear from you. Everyone here, we have been called by Lynn. In fact, I just read one of your messages about the chemtrails. You shared that video. What's your take on it? Because, look, I just don't have enough information to be fully conclusive. But what's your take on this chemtrail thing that you sent me?
Well, we're talking special effects department again. In other words, it's the whole thing about what really happened. Well, it's a special effect. If something is staged, it has to be done convincingly. So, for example, this is why I sent you all that material about 9/11 at the Pentagon. Everybody wanted to talk about the controlled demolitions in Manhattan. But nobody goes to war because of an attack on Larry Silverstein and Frank Lowy, who were the landlords of the complex, so that they could save all that money on asbestos removal with the controlled demolitions. That's not an excuse to, if they had only staged 9/11 with those controlled demolitions in New York, they wouldn't have had a pretext to go to war in Iraq and in Afghanistan. That required the attack on the Pentagon, which, I don't know, always seems to get shuffled to second place in this.
It does. It really does. It's like certain things, of course, are more spectacular and more symbolic. Like I noticed that it's always like never forget, but it's always forget. Building 7. They are masters at misdirection for sure.
Right, and also another thing that bothers me about this stuff is people always say predictive programming. Well, the predictive programming for 9/11 was the 1993 World Trade Center truck bomb. Have you ever studied that?
I have studied that one a bit, and again,
the blind sheikh Omar Abdul Rahman, and basically the FBI set it up as a sting operation. They hired a former Egyptian army officer named Ahmad Salem, who the New York Times actually covered the trial in great detail. And Ahmad Salem basically became, he was assigned to infiltrate the inner circle around the blind sheikh, and his mosque, I think, was in Jersey City, was where his mosque was. And Ahmad Salem was the one who basically did it per the FBI's instructions, set up the entire operation. He rented the truck, and then he was supposed to secure the explosives for the bombing. Now, this is 1993 we're talking about, right? He was supposed to secure the explosives, and he called his FBI handler and said, hey, look, why don't we replace the explosives with dummy? These people don't know what's going on. We don't want to endanger anybody, to stay on the safe side.
Wait, you said FBI? You're talking about the Federal Bureau of Instigation, right?
Right. Federal Bureau of Intimidation, Federal Bureau of PsyOps, whatever you want to call them. And he said to the FBI, well, look, we don't want to have a real bombing go off. I've got the truck. It's all set up. We've got all the inner circle around the blind sheikh, implicated in all this. So, let's replace the explosive with some dummy powder so nothing will actually happen. And his FBI handler said, no, go ahead and set it up with a real explosives, with a real bomb. And, of course, you had a truck bomb go off in the basement garage of the World Trade Center, and it did a little damage. I don't know if anybody was here. Again, we're talking about special effects, because obviously his FBI. Oh, and how do we know this? How do we know that it's not just Ahmad Salem claiming this on the witness stand? On the witness stand during the trial. Well, Ahmad Salem taped the conversation with his FBI handler. He actually got the whole conversation on tape. So we have the FBI implicated in actually instructing their infiltrator, their confidential informant, to secure real explosives so that the special effect would be convincing, so that it really would be a truck bomb.
Okay.
And guess what the judge ruled? The only reason I know all this is because it was all covered in the New York Times. It was no secret. And I couldn't believe that everybody was. I mean, the New York Times, I thought, oh, my God, this is it. The FBI is implicated in setting this whole thing up. And you know what the judge ruled? The judge ruled that Ahmad Salem's telephone conversation with his FBI handler was inadmissible as evidence because it violated a law that had been passed in New York State, basically passed to protect corrupt politicians, that you could not record a telephone conversation unless you had the consent of all parties. Are you familiar with this law they have?
Yeah, I am.
No,
And,
if you're being threatened, if you're being blackmailed, if you can catch a public official in a crime, taping them on the telephone, you can't introduce it as evidence in court because it violates this law. And so the judge ruled that taped telephone conversation as inadmissible, and therefore the jury either they couldn't listen to it because it never got played, or they
how
couldn't
convenient.
consider it a deliberate.
But recently it's been brought up that Trump was trying to use the FBI to invent terrorists out of Antifa in Portland. And, to me, it's just pretty much the case that that's all they do is they invent stuff. They invent threats left and right. And they didn't 100% play ball with Trump, apparently.
Well, that's the right. This is good. Your analysis is really good on this because you consistently point out that the left stages fake active shooter drills and the right stages fake terrorist attacks. So, for example, the Waukesha, boy, this was the sloppiest psyop. If you go and look at this, that Waukesha red SUV that's allegedly crashed into the crowd during the Christmas parade in Waukesha, it was so badly staged that it's obvious. People deconstructed it right away and said, look how phony this is. Also, the crisis acting was really bad. Because they've got the crisis actors screaming, oh my God, oh my, they sound really fake. But this is what incriminates elements of the so-called conservatives or right wing in setting up fake terrorist psyops. That's why I posted all those links, and especially to the Darrell Brooks trial, right? He's allegedly the driver of this red SUV. When the FBI showed up, the SUV was actually, he backed it in, we don't even know that he did it. Whoever placed the damaged SUV that supposedly crashed into these people in the Christmas parade in Waukesha actually backed it into the driveway so the damaged front end was visible. During the trial, there's actually a video of the FBI agent, I guess, testify. They present the tape of the FBI's interview when they came to, maybe they came to arrest Brooks or I don't know what. And what does he say? He says, is this some kind of movie? You can hear him say, is this some kind of movie?
Always
he realized that.
Okay, interesting.
That he was being set up.
Interesting.
That he was being set up. Either he was being set up or somehow or other he was drawn into the psyop and didn't realize how he was being used. Have you watched any of this Darrell Brooks trial?
Some of it's hysterical, and
yeah, it's like Judge Judy, right? It's like
really
a Judge Judy thing.
It really is. His mad dogging the judge, his antics. It was very clownish, and I'm just wondering, why is this even on TV like this? This has got to be.
Well, like the Alex Jones against the Sandy Hook parents, the same kind of every principle in the book. I mean, if it was on appeal, it should be thrown out. It's ridiculous. Of course, Jones didn't even get a jury trial on the truth or falsehood of. It's crazy. He was accused of defamation. Typically, there's two stages in a defamation or a libel trial. The first is to determine the truth or the falsehood of whatever was said, and then the second, and then the determination of damage is based on how much damage was done to the plaintiff, to the aggrieved party. And Jones was denied a jury trial for the determination of whether Noah Posner was real, whether any of this was true.
Yes,
the judge simply ruled that was, hey, that's already decided it was real. And then he brought in the jury to decide what the penalty would be, which is like, I don't know, $485 billion or whatever.
I'm going to reach out to Jim Fetzer because he's refiling his case with regard to this.
I just read a piece that Fetzer's lawyers are taking it to the Supreme Court.
I'm very interested in this because when you really get down to it, if you want to be real, Jones's defense was weak and pathetic because if anybody's responsible for making the Sandy Hookers a public face of the tragedy, it wasn't Jones, it was CNN. It's the people who put them in the spotlight. And that's not really advisable anyway. If you're a witness to a massacre or you're a victim, when you're still in shock, to go on camera, there's a lot of reasons why it's bad. But my point is, Jones didn't center his show around them. He platformed the topic, but it's more widespread, which makes me think that he's meant to be the canary in the coal mine, or he's meant to be perceived that way. So everybody's like, look, I don't want my assets frozen. I don't want that to happen to me. And you'll notice, like, I'm not at all fazed by this, and I'm glad that Fetzer isn't either.
Right. Just getting back to a point I was making, because this is very important that people understand. You know, they forget things like, for example, the Oklahoma City bombing. In terms of, people say, well, that's predictive programming. No, it was actually something that was set up by the BATF and the FBI. And here again, you know, we've already discussed the cast of thousands, how it becomes a cast of millions because everybody wants to participate, and the fractal nature of compartmentalized, like NASA's, you know, moonwalk fakery. How do you get all these people to participate in it? You know, because it's so compartmentalized. Each one of them has a part in it. But it's also their willingness to be blind, their willingness not to see things. That's how the entire city of New York could go along with those controlled demolitions on 9/11. I mean, it blows your mind to even think about it. Everybody knew. The firemen, I've been through this. It just makes my head explode. The firemen, the cops, the Port Authority workers, construction workers, everybody knew those were controlled demolitions, but no one would speak up and say so. That's your cast of millions. Now, the other aspect, a Hollywood movie, you know, starring this and starring that, you know, Charlton Heston and Sophia Loren, and with a cast of thousands. I know people nowadays, they don't really remember that because now it's digital effects achieve that cast of thousands.
Right,
you know,
right.
You show
Lord of the Rings.
You show you show the stadium, and they can digitally create that cast of thousands. But back in the day when I was watching movies, when I was growing up, and you probably are old enough to remember real stunts and real, you know, back in the day, you had to hire a cast of thousands. And I come back again to this great movie based on the novel Day of the Locust about Hollywood, where there's a scene where they're staging the Battle of Waterloo for this movie. And they have all this scaffolding set up. But it isn't. I guess it isn't completed, and the movie shows. It flashes. You see, there's a pile of signs that says danger, danger, danger. But the signs are all in a pile. They haven't been put up around the scaffolding, and so as they're filming this Battle of Waterloo, this cast of hundreds, I guess, you know, that are staging the battle. They start climbing up the scaffolding, and it collapses. Now, no one is killed, but there's some people whose legs are broken. So the Hollywood producers, the art director, and everybody, they then have to basically they got to get everybody to keep their mouths shut, and then they pay them off. They get the insurance company to cover the injuries from a special effect that didn't work out, where people got hurt, and that's very important to me. Because in addition to this cast of thousands and cast of millions, what makes the movie work is convincing special effects. And sometimes a convincing special effect requires a real bomb. In the 1993 World Trade Center bombing, I think it misses the point to say, well, this is predictive programming for 9/11. You know, they staged the first terrorist attack. And you also have the attack on the Cole, the USS Cole, allegedly, and the embassy bombings that occurred in all these events that led up to 9/11 itself that have to convince people through special effects. That's the only thing that makes the narrative in the movie convincing is special effects.
You know what? I was going to say this too. With regard to 9/11 and the role of planes, look back at how many movies made it a point to have exploding jets. Jet fuel's like a main character in so many action films. And
I saw this.
All
I saw this
conditioning.
In the most annoying movie. I may have talked about this before. It was a series, and some of your listeners may remember it, called Sniper, starring Tom Berenger. He was pretty big in Hollywood for a while. He was in a lot of big films. And I guess the first couple were interesting, but by the third one, it was just getting really tired. You know, it was like, you know, these sequels get kind of ridiculous after a while. And in this sequel to Sniper, and Tom Berenger was in it, I'm pretty sure, there's a scene where a guy hijacks a streetcar in Buenos Aires to escape from the police or somebody. and he's riding the streetcar. He takes over. He grabs it from the streetcar conductor, and he takes over the streetcar, and he's riding the streetcar. It crashes into like a compact car in the road because it goes through it's one of these runaway scenes, a runaway streetcar, and the whole thing explodes. It's the most stupid thing I've ever seen. When I was watching the movie, I remember I was watching the movie with some people, and this is why I'm very you don't want to invite me to a crowd of people to watch a stupid movie.
I bet.
Say, oh yeah, because I'll say, what the hell just happened there? I've seen so many. Why is a streetcar crashing into a vehicle going to create this giant pyrotechnic explosion? That's stupid.
This raises a great point, though, and this is something that Douglas Trumbull, who did the special effects for Kubrick's 2001 Space Odyssey, commented on. He said that when we transitioned from real actors and real props into CGI, the reality was lost, that the artistry was lost, the quality went down. And I think this is intentional.
It cheapens the special effect because now, and this is going to really expose them.
Because audiences aren't as discriminating. Now audiences are easier to fool. That's one of the things, too.
You got to dumb down the audience. You really got to dumb down the audience to get most of them to accept it. But the people who are hip, the people who like the people who ever worked as EMTs, or like you, maybe have you had experience in the military or professionally handling dead bodies. You could look at something and say, well, that's stupid. You don't pump the leg. Where is it? You say they were pumping the leg in that scene in.
Yeah, the scene in South Korea at the Halloween party, one of the crisis actors wasn't issued, I guess he wasn't issued a training dummy, and when they started filming the action, they were like, go. He reached for the nearest dummy and started pumping the thigh. And I was like, that's not going to do very much, although I could have used it. I was just back from the gym, and I was like, that might actually be good. But anyway, yeah, he was giving CPR to the thighs of some dummy.
Well, that's what I'm saying. The special effects, if people are smart enough, like the CGI that was released for the Waukesha red SUV and all that, it was done so badly. And one thing they did was they threw around shoes. There's a great video. I posted this on your Facebook page about the actual video that was released that was supposed to show the Waukesha, another one of these trucks like the Nice truck, runaway truck. We've had these runaway vehicle events that have occurred over the years. I remember the Nice truck. It wasn't a bombing, was it? The truck just crashed into people?
It was just a truck. And I'm like, where are the anti-gun people on banning trucks and vans already? But, yeah, this is the thing. And the shoes. What's with the shoes at every single event?
Yeah, well, I'm guessing that the shoes are placement of where the actors are supposed to cluster around with one of these dummies, and that's what it looked like to me.
Ooh, interesting.
But it's done so sloppily. The special effect. So that's why I wouldn't know looking at this stuff. I wouldn't know what the hell I was looking at. I have no real experience with I have no experience as an EMT or anything like that. I have no idea. If it weren't for people like you and others, now so many others saying, "Hey, look what they're doing. That makes no sense. It's stupid." I wouldn't know.
Oh yes. In fact, it was after the fake killing of a rapper in 2019 where we saw EMTs with black gloves giving one-handed chest compressions to a moving patient on a gurney, threw him in the back of the ambulance, slammed the door, and discontinued the chest pumps. Lack of blood.
Or like dragging Ashley Babbitt's body down the steps or whatever. That is stupid stuff that no EMT would do. Dumbass stuff. The people who know better will look at this and say, well, that's crazy. That's got to be fake. Or they'll say, oh, that's a dummy.
Which is why I reach out for human intel. And listen to what Not Shocked, a commenter, says. Viewers used to suspend disbelief for movies. Now it applies to the news. Absolutely.
Willful suspension. Yes, willful. From Shakespeare to ancient Greek theater to modern movies and television, all of it depends on this principle of the willful suspension of disbelief on the part of the audience. If you're in a movie theater and it's badly staged and it's poorly done, people in the audience will start throwing popcorn at the screen, and they'll say they'll see, really, if it's that bad, even the audience will see that it's badly done. And they used to do that. Well, that's Mystery Science Theater 3000, or the old Star Trek TV series, which I thought sucked, really, mostly because the special effects sucked. They just weren't very convincing. Not like Kubrick's 2001: A Space Odyssey. That had really.
It's got to be what was it, Wuhan? Do you remember the Kung Flu? We called it Kung Flu.
Yeah, people dropping dead.
Yeah, it's like that guy looks like he got kicked by some invisible ghost of like Bruce Lee's ghost is going around kicking people over. We called it Kung Flu. And then when it came to America, nobody got knocked over like that.
No, they had to get rid of that. They had to get rid of that because they figured the audience is a little more sophisticated.
Here they are, but over there in China or wherever, in Wuhan, where they think the old Godzilla movies look legit, they probably thought, wow, that's legit. I mean, I'm just saying, as audiences, they're probably less discriminating, as evidenced by their fake moon landing footage. Way worse than ours.
Right. Nothing undermines the willful suspension of disbelief in the audience more than, one, bad crisis acting, and we got a lot of that, like Robbie Parker and Wayne Carver, Robbie Parker, Wayne Carver, Gene Rose. We got a lot of bad crisis acting because, as you say, these are people who could never make it in Hollywood for the most part. So they're what do you want me to say? They're not just
they're gags. The gags. You got the Screen Actors Guild and the Government Actors Guild. The gags.
Right. Bad crisis acting and shitty special effects. Cheap, low-budget special effects that just don't work unless the audience is really stupid and doesn't know any better. See, unless the audience is gonna buy it. And I remember once I was sitting with my father. This is quite a few years ago, and we were watching one of these movies, and it was kind of cheaply done. And I said, I can't watch something like an explosion or something that there was no reason for. Well, as you say. We were treated to all kinds of movies where cars crashed and blew up. When's the last time you've been in a car accident and seen an explosion?
Right.
I've seen quite a few car accidents. I've been in a few. Nothing ever explodes. It's like maybe they used to talk about, this is an interesting sideline pursuing, but there was the Ford Pinto, that there's a big scandal. They said that the placement of the gas tank was causing the thing to explode when it was involved in accidents because they put the gas tank in the back or somewhere. Do you remember this at all?
I heard about this and that it was prone to explode, and you bump it from the side and boom. Was that real? You think?
Not real. Now who knows? Who knows really? But this once again falls under the category of bad special effects. If you saw it happen, would you believe it anyway? And yeah, we were watching a movie, and it was just a really shitty special effect. And I said, look how stupid that is. I said, it wouldn't happen that way in real life. And my father said, well, why don't you shut up? We're just trying to enjoy the movie. Well, how stupid I said, Dad, how stupid do you have to be to enjoy something that's asinine and that insults your intelligence? It insults your intelligence.
Look, that's a great point, because when you look at a lot of the fakery, it's almost like maybe it's so bad that it deliberately gaslights the more critical consumers of info. It's an insult, literally, to your intelligence. And what that does is it forces you to subjugate your intelligence to the consensus trance. I'm not going to think too hard about this because it's a conflict, the cognitive dissonance. And that's,
right, cognitive dissonance, yeah.
And that's what it does. The only reason why we talk at all is because there's a disharmony between what we're told and what we're experiencing, and we're noticing. And those of us that are noticing are experiencing cognitive dissonance induced by terrible special effects.
Yes, and it comes back to the most powerful weapon the deep state has is shallowness. The shallowness and stupidity of the audience that isn't bothered by having their intelligence insulted. My God, when you look at 9/11, come on, you really expect everybody to believe that these towers, were turned to rubble from fires caused by jet fuel? I mean, that's ridiculous. It's such an insult to the intelligence of the audience, but the audience was willfully suspended their disbelief. at this stupid, bad movie. And that's all 9/11 was. Everybody out there, if anybody asks you, well, what happened on 9/11? You say it was just a movie made for TV news. But movies do have to have reasonably convincing special effects. And what happened at the Pentagon really was an explosion. And we've got a live witness who knew it was an explosion and that there was no plane. She was a Pentagon employee named April Gallup. And it sounds, she said, and if you ever watch that interview with her, she says, I can't, and she was threatened by the FBI. And she said they did it to brainwash. She said there was no plane at the Pentagon. They did this to brainwash people. They threatened me and tried to intimidate me. She said, I was there. I came to work that morning with my daughter, my son, her infant son or daughter, I can't even remember. And as soon as she turned on her computer, the bomb went off. And apparently some of the debris fell on her. She was a little bit, she wasn't, I don't think she was injured, but some of the debris fell on her and everything. And she said it was definitely an explosion that went off. She says in this interview, she was convinced that as soon as she hit the key to start her computer, that's exactly when the bomb went off.
Interesting. Now you might have inadvertent witnesses, and even like after the Vegas shooting, I had some reports that I haven't been able to corroborate of people who were supposedly who are in hotels who are signing non-disclosure agreements and given cash to keep their mouths shut. And it wouldn't surprise me. I don't even think you'd need to shell out a lot of money. You don't need to give out billions. That's only for the big stars like the Sandy types, the Sandy Hookers. But the average actor is desperate for a gig. I think they'll take $100 to lie on TV to the news. And speaking of special effects, the Challenger, they just found like 118 tons.
Yeah, I heard that.
Okay, now that Challenger thing kind of irks me because people say, oh, we all watched it live on TV. The teachers No, I'm sorry. It was not live for the students. They caught it on a rebroadcast, and the teachers didn't tell them, which means that the students were shown a snuff film. Wittingly.
Yes, and I listened very carefully to the news report on this. The first thing is they said that it was discovered in the course of making a movie about the Bermuda Triangle. In other words, they're suggesting that wherever the Bermuda Triangle is, that's where they found this piece of debris from the Challenger. And the other thing the news report said was it brought up Krista McAuliffe. Boy, this was the real tearjerker, if you're old enough to remember, was that school teacher, Krista McAuliffe, who allegedly died.
Yes, that's why they put this in all of the classrooms. That way the teachers would be able to say, hey, look, imagine if I went up into space and I blew up. And they had everybody crying, and everybody thought they saw it live, but they didn't see it live. And that's the key here. It was optional. They could have said, hey, do we want to show these children a teacher going into space and then blowing up? Because we know that's what happened. No, we'll just show it to them. I mean, how rotten was that? To me, that's trauma-induced mind control. MK Ultra in the schools.
Yes, in the audience. Bad special effects, lousy special effects. But sometimes a special effect requires a real explosion in a Hollywood movie or at 9/11. And why is that important to me? Because real crimes were committed. The FBI threatening a live witness who says, there was no plane, something went off, they had some kind of explosion, a bomb here at the Pentagon. The FBI threatened her. They literally threatened her. That's why she went out and gave that interview.
Look, they will.
Blew the whistle on it.
They will, to protect their big lies. A few years ago, there was like a 70...
That's a crime.
It is a crime. And there was like this 70-some-year-old who was trying to sell a piece of a moon rock, and NASA sent a SWAT team, and they did a sting. And I thought, why would they forcibly detain somebody? Why would they bring out armed SWAT officers for a moon rock? And it's because if somebody were to look at that under a microscope and figure out it's a piece of petrified wood, it would be very damaging. And I think that they have to protect their narrative at any cost.
Yeah, barring a non-disclosure agreement, really all they can do is either bribe somebody or threaten them to keep their mouth shut. Now that's criminal. That's extortion. That's racketeering. And if government agents are involved in this, that is a prosecutable crime. And the other thing, and that's why to me, the real key to 9/11 is not those controlled demolitions in New York City. That only reveals how prostituted the population of that city was, that they went along with, that they were willing to be, every one of them wanted to be in this cast of thousands, to validate that the planes knocked down the towers, which nobody could have really believed. But they managed to induce everybody to participate in that narrative. But at the Pentagon, it was different because there just wasn't many people at the Pentagon that morning. That whole wing of the Pentagon had been vacated for repairs. They made sure there was no. It was the coincidence of it was ridiculous.
Well, they make sure that there are multiple plausible stories, and it's reality fluid. Reality is fluid. Way before gender fluid, we were already reality fluid. Like, let me ask you a question here, and there's no wrong answer.
Well, just one more thing.
Okay.
One more thing. I don't want to let this go. This Pentagon 9/11 thing. Whoever staged that event at the Pentagon committed high treason. Bottom line. Of course, in my view, Donald Trump committed high treason with Operation Warp Speed, giving hustling through FDA emergency use authorization for this experimental mRNA shot.
And he's not looking too good these days. Hey, let me run this by you, though.
But that's high treason. That's high treason, and it's prosecutable. And the
look,
DOD...
if the PSYOP entertainment complex were fully exposed, I think, yes, they would say, hey, look, the mass media has been waging PSYWAR against the populations for generations. There's something inherently, there's got to be some Geneva Convention level prohibitions against psychological warfare. And there used to be. It used to be like Rumsfeld. Oh, we only insert fake news in foreign press. Well, there's no foreign press. It's all...
Well, that's the Smith Modernization Clause of the 2013 National Defense Authorization Act, which ostensibly made it legal for them to propagandize the American people. During the Cold War, supposedly they had prohibited that. They could say you could target anybody outside the United States with lies and propaganda. But that was called the Smith-Mundt Act. But then the 2013 National Defense Authorization Act basically repealed that Smith-Mundt Act and said, well, now you could target the American people just like anybody else. Just like people in the Middle East or Europe or Africa, you can plant false stories, you can do whatever you want, and you could stage fake events, and it isn't really, for propaganda purposes, and it isn't really criminal. But I still say that staging a bombing at the Pentagon to propagate the narrative that a plane crashed there, a hijacked plane, that is high treason. And everybody who knew about that and participated in that can be arrested tomorrow for high treason.
Yeah, I would say so. Because, it's a bombing. It's a bombing. It doesn't matter what the false explanation was.
It's a special effect. It's a special effect.
No,
and they did it.
Now, there's no wrong answer here, but in your take, what was most likely the cause? Because this is now a debate again. The cause of George Floyd's death. Was it knee on the neck, fentanyl, misinformation, or climate change?
Climate change.
That's what I was thinking. Yeah, I can't breathe. That's what I'm saying. It's climate change. I was going to say chemtrails, but...
Yeah, chemtrails. Well, to me, I don't presume to know, what's going on there. Are they spraying something? What's happening? I just know it's a special effect. Now, what is the intention of the special effect? Is it like that scene, that classic scene in The Wizard of Oz, where the Wicked Witch of the West is flying around on her broomstick, painting the sky with the phrase "Surrender, Dorothy"?
Ooh,
I think
interesting.
We all remember that.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about that till just now, but that's a very powerful image there.
Yeah, that's what I think of when I see obvious. I don't want to call it. Well, people say it's geoengineering going on. That remains to be proven. Of course, they're out there in the open, Bill Gates is saying, "Oh yeah, of course we want to be able to shut the sun out and reflect the sun and all that," and that would require the spraying of, I guess, some kind of high particleized metallic stuff like aluminum.
Yes, stratospheric aerosol injections with vitamin.
Yeah, exactly.
I think it's going to be vitamin. Barium and aluminum.
But they can spray chemicals in the sky that will then fall onto crops or into the water, and or
Look, I
who
understand
knows?
why people even find this plausible.
A
Even if you
vaccine, maybe.
like, look about this. Like,
Right?
if they're willing to allow drugs in to get you, like if they're willing to, it's like public health isn't the main thing. Whatever they say, I understand why people believe the chemtrail thing. I just have a lot of questions about it, but I understand why people find certain things plausible. I understand why people think that Hillary Clinton wears the faces of dead sacrificial victims. It's like they give you every reason to believe these things.
Yes. Yeah. It's almost like, can you really rule anything out? Because you know how sick and twisted these people are, and from time to time they are caught doing this crazy shit. Like, for example, the Nexium cult there in upstate New York. I mean, it really was this crazy sex slave cult, and a lot of high-profile people were involved in it, including one of the Bronfman heiresses. How much of this, what was really going on at Jeffrey Epstein's island? Man, the stuff I read about this blows my mind. And they had compromised politicians and prime ministers and Hollywood producers and scientists even. So yeah, there's definitely something there for sure, but what actually was going on, it probably was criminal, and it probably did involve if not outright pedophilia, certainly, sex with underage girls and stuff like, I don't know what's.
Well, who was it? Dollar Vigilante went out there and he found that apparently that whole temple thing was a big prop. Like it's difficult to say where the theater ends
Well, it
and
was
the
a
reality
storage
begins,
shed.
but
Could have been a storage shed.
but regardless, the world stage psyops, as you said, it's important to understand, what's the meaning behind the special effect, and how is it supposed to affect reality, which is what they do it for. It's a force multiplier.
Well, you got into this with all the symbolism that Kubrick embedded in The Shining, the two twins standing there. And this is a very important point I want to make. Because in the post-literate society, and I encounter this a lot, people talk about the movie as though that's the original narrative. But 9 out of 10 movies used to be based on novels, sometimes very old novels. And so you then have to look and see, what did they add to the movie or change in the movie script that's different from what was in the original novel or story?
Yes,
Because
that's what
very
gives it
deliberate.
away. In fact, you mentioned Kubrick, and just the other day, the daughter of Stanley Kubrick was hanging out with Alex Jones. And I find that to be a very curious pairing when I think about the significance of Kubrick in the big picture.
In a post-literate society, and here again, the weapon of the deep state is shallowness. How many people out there have seen a movie and they're convinced that's the original narrative and they've never read the book? Me, I'm the kind of person and that has to do with, novels by John Grisham, Stephen King, Frederick Forsyth, John le Carré, Graham Greene. Everybody's seen the movie, but only certain people have read the original novel, and they know and sometimes very, very significant changes are made to the script. For example, Ernest Hemingway, classic American writer. One of his stories is called The Snows of Kilimanjaro. And at the end of it, the protagonist he's got a gangrenous wound, and he's out there in the African bush, and they can't get medical help to him, and he dies at the end of the short story. But David, I guess it must have been Darryl Zanuck or David Selznick, whoever produced the movie. They didn't like that. They didn't think Hollywood, audiences would like that. And so at the end, and this was a big movie starring Gregory Peck, Susan Hayward. It was a big movie because everybody would go out to see a movie based on a Hemingway novel, right? The Sun Also Rises, A Farewell to Arms. These were classic novels that Hemingway wrote, just as they would go out to see a movie based on a Steinbeck novel like The Grapes of Wrath. One of the things that really obsessed me for a while is I would critique a movie and say, well, how much did they distort or changed the original novel or short story to make this movie. And sometimes
Yes,
it's
that
pretty
used to make me
outrageous.
mad. Like, okay, American Psycho. A lot of people know the movie. The movie's incredibly
Burt
shallow.
Easton Ellis. Is that Burt Easton Ellis, or
Yeah,
am I thinking?
Yeah, it's Bret Easton
Bret
Ellis,
Easton
Less
Ellis.
Than
Okay.
Zero. You've probably heard of. I mean, a
Right,
lot of his
Less Than
stuff
Zero.
turned into movies, but the American Psycho book is inside the guy's head, stream of consciousness for hundreds of pages, and it's very nuanced, very erratic. It's how you imagine an OCD psychopathic killer would think. But in the movies, you only see the surface, which is the whole point of the book, that the people around him don't have any insight, that they only see the surface. And the whole book is really an attack on, superficial society, etc. And he's just reflecting it. But when you watch the movie, you see a horror film, just a guy killing people. You miss the internal process. And that to me is what
Right.
film generally does. Although recently I've been impressed with Netflix and other streaming services' ability to take stories and extend them out beyond the confines of a feature film and get some more of the nuance out.
Well, I always, a big thing with me is how faithful to the novel is the movie. So, for example, Martin Scorsese made, and I really appreciate it when the director goes out of his way to be faithful to the original novel. So, for example, Martin Scorsese made a film called The Age of Innocence with Daniel Day-Lewis and Michelle Pfeiffer and Winona Ryder, or whatever her name is. And it really is. And I had read the novel many years ago by Edith Wharton, and I got to hand it to Scorsese. He went out of his way to really stick exactly to the novel. When Kubrick made Barry Lyndon, which was a terrible flop here in the United States, it's like a 3-hour film, but I love it. I got to say, Kubrick was really, how do you say it? He was very particular about sticking exactly to the text of the original novel because it's a classic novel. In other words, when the director is saying, hey, my audience is literate enough that they're going to resent it if I change the end of this. Well, in the case of Hemingway's short story, The Snows of Kilimanjaro, it has a very tragic ending where the protagonist dies of gangrene out there in the African bush. The doctors don't get to him in time or whatever. But as I say, when Hollywood made the film, they figured audiences wouldn't like that. Audiences like a happy ending. And so at the end, he's rescued and he survives. He lives. And Hemingway was so disgusted by this because he wrote the original story. He said, I don't want you putting my name on this movie and saying based on the story by Ernest Hemingway. He said, you should call it The Snows of Kilimanjaro by Daryl Zanuck. In other words, it's not my story. You completely changed the story. And that, once again, what is the weapon of the deep state, which is Hollywood? It's shallowness. It's they're more and more, because they've gotten so cheap and so shoddy, they don't care if there are people in the audience who say, well, wait a minute, I read Great Expectations, or I read Oliver Twist, the David Copperfield, or A Tale of Two Cities, and that's not what happens in the novel.
I've noticed,
what did you change that for?
Like, take the movie Blade Runner, which is well known for the cinematography, the mood, the atmospheric.
Right, that's based on Philip K. Dick's To Android's Dream of Electric Sheep.
Yes, and they're hunting down the replicants that are so close to human that you can't tell the difference. But
genetically engineered, right?
Yeah, and the original movie has like certain iconic scenes. It's Harrison Ford. It's kind of a slow, brooding movie. I like the book, but they remade it and they replaced everything that was good about it with video game level cheesy special effects. They destroyed I think the was it Ridley Scott? Just like I constantly see this whenever they bring back these sequels with these new special effects, they kill the soul of what was originally organic effects and real people.
I call that attenuation. By that I mean, do people still use fax machines? I hated fax machines. When I was still working, we always had to send documents over using fax machines. And the problem with a fax machine is each successive copy, like the old Xerox machines, each successive copy gets shittier and shittier and shittier until finally you can barely read the stupid thing, you know? And I call that attenuation. The signal is so weak by the time, because it's been shallowed and shallowed and shallowed. Finally, you can't even tell what the original was. And that's what they do with with entertainment. It's what they do with the narratives that make up propaganda, agitprop, and TV news. You see attenuation. And sometimes the original narrative is completely lost. But once again, this is all that willful suspension of disbelief that they're counting on in the audience. The audience is so shallow that most of them won't even be aware of it. Or
Yes.
if they are, they won't care.
The
They won't care.
TikTokification of the American mind. I think they've got everyone distracted enough to where 1 minute we're worried that we're going to be nuked into Judgment Day, Armageddon, the world's going to end. The next day, it's collective outrage against Kanye West. And then the next day, it's Pelosi. And they're making light of an attack on an elderly man. Like, you can see how definitely they have weaponized shallowness. You nailed it.
And that's this. When you think of how these narratives, you go back, like, for example, the original Sandy Hook narrative was completely different from what, you know. First they claimed there was a guy in camo running around in the woods that the police picked up. Initially, they had the news showed them arresting Ryan Lanza, but he said this is a hoax. And then they said, but Adam Lanza apparently had Ryan Lanza's ID on him. That they claimed that. As the narrative progressed, and the same thing with the Boston Marathon bombing was a great example of this. As the narrative, day by day, week by week, month by month, we said, well, we didn't really mean this, we meant that, and we misreported this. We here's what really happened. It's like that fax machine that's copying the original over. It just attenuates. It gets weaker and weaker and weaker until very little of the original narrative is even left. And there's a hell of a lot of cognitive dissonance involved in that, because anybody with a thinking brain will look at that and say, well, how could you possibly be mistaken about that?
Yeah, we're reality fluid, and they're still solidifying it. And, you know, the day of the Parkland event, there was some footage from David Hogg is in a closet, and he's interviewing somebody. He says, okay, here we are, Parkland High School. It's your first school shooting. How do you feel? It's 9:30 a.m. And she's like, I'm very scared. We're hiding in the closet. Then you find out that the shooting happened the shooting happened in the afternoon, and he wasn't there.
Right.
He had still ride his bicycle over there. But it's like, wait, 9:30 in the morning or some early in the morning shooting, but then it happens in the afternoon. Then you find out there was a drill earlier in the day.
And this explains this psyop called the Mandela effect, which was very deliberately engineered to see just how shallow they could get with people's memory. In a post-literate society, where the memory people have of the narrative is from they saw it on a movie, or they saw it on a sampler on the wall where the lion is laying down next to the lamb. But they never actually read the passage in the Bible which says a wolf. It never said a lion. Never. But lion with the lamb is alliterative. That is to say, it sounds better to say the lion shall lay down with the lamb than the wolf with the lamb, because it's two L's. It's more poetic. And so the sampler that a lot of people used to have on their wall, that sort of picture, had a lion with the lamb, but that's not what the original text in the book of Isaiah says, if you recall it. This is one of my favorite passages. I studied it in the original Hebrew, and then also the Greek version, the Septuagint, where they shall beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. Lo yisa goy al goy charev. Nation, goy means nation, referring to all the nations other than Israel. Lo yisa goy al goy charev, lo yilmedu od milchama is the original Hebrew. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war anymore. And then it goes on to talk about the wolf shall lay down with the lamb. And this was a very familiar passage to me. And when I heard these Mandela idiots, Brian Staveley, if you're listening, I'm directing this at you. I'll bet you never fucking took one look at the Bible, Brian Staveley, because I know you were a major fan of professional wrestling. Boy, did it disappoint me to see your personal page on Facebook with you beaming, holding one of these WWE wrestling belts, and it dawned on me that you were a fan of WWE professional wrestling, which I really don't like. I've never liked it because I don't think it should be called wrestling. It really bothered me that the NCAA, I had. Let me talk about this a little bit.
Well,
do you mind if I kind of go off on a tangent
but
on it?
One point here on
it's about the corruption of values. It really
okay,
because
if somebody's going to comment on the Bible and they haven't read it, it's like they don't have any. You obviously do. And specifically, though, there's a Mandela effect about Dolly having braces in a show called Moonraker, and he admitted he has never seen the movie. He's making his
he wasn't even around. He probably wasn't even born yet when the original movie was made.
But he was making the judgment, as most people do, based on that one little clip. Do you remember? And it's like, wait, there's an entire movie, and you have to look at the entire movie, and does she have braces throughout? But when he said he hadn't watched the movie, I thought, you really, if you're going to be the guru on this topic, you got to watch the material that you're sourcing.
Yeah, they all pretended to be shocked about a passage. Actually, there's two places where this occurs. One is in the book of Samuel, I think. I think it was in the book of Samuel, or it might have been Judges, Shoftim. I can't, where the God commands the Israelites to wipe out this rival tribe, this rival nation, and kill. It might have been Saul actually who was commanded to do this, and because he spared the stock animals, and I might have taken slaves. He had been, and Prophet Samuel had told Saul, God has ordered you to destroy everything, kill everything. Or I think it says, everything that pisses against a wall, which is a very common expression in the ancient world for males, right? The only people capable of pissing against the wall are males, humans, dogs, whatever. And it wouldn't have been, I remember this passage from when I studied it in Hebrew school. But Brian Stavely had people in his group with this Mandela effect stuff, and they said, this was never in our Bible. To pisses against the wall. Well, yes, it was. You just never read the Bible.
They say
shallow.
Unicorns weren't in the Bible. Now they are. It's a Mandela effect. And then I looked a little deeper, and some say that any reference to a unicorn is a reference to the rhinoceros. What do you think, rhinoceroses or unicorns?
Yeah, that's one plausible explanation. This is, of course, a part of this is just ignorance. As I say, in the Post-Literate Society, most people never read the original text. They just saw it in a movie, or they saw it in a sampler on the wall, right? They never actually read the text or studied it. So it's that level of shallowness in the Post-Literate Society.
Oh, my favorite Bible scholar is Russian Vids, who can't remember any Bible verses, but he knows all the Meatloaf lyrics. He closes every video with a Meatloaf lyric, and I'm like, wait, you're the guy who says the Bible's the standard for the truther. If you don't cite the Bible, you're not in truth. It's like, well, then recite some Bible verses. I think we're all tired of Meatloaf.
Right, and these are people who have never, ever read Caesar's Messiah by Joseph Atwill, really brilliant biblical scholar. I mean, he's really parsed the Greek right down to every letter. And it shows how shallow people's memory is. It's interesting because his explanation for the creation of the gospel myth, as he would call it, as what he calls a typology, that is to say, for example, Herod ordering that all the male children born on a particular day should be slaughtered because one of them is prophesied to be the Messiah. Well, that's an exact replica of the story in Exodus, where in Exodus where Pharaoh orders the killing of the firstborn, and then later, when Moses asks God, it calls down these plagues, it's like 10 plagues or 12 plagues on the Egyptians. The very last plague is that their firstborn that the male baby should die, or I guess all the babies should die, or the male baby should die. And the Israelites were told, the children of Israel that were told to the lamb that they slaughtered to eat for the Passover meal, their last meal before they left Egypt. They were supposed to smear the blood on the door so that the angel of death would bypass their door and only kill the Egyptian first. That's a terrible story when you think about it. But what Joseph Atwill is saying is, well, what they've done is the people who constructed the gospel, these Hellenized Jews of the Tiberius Alexander's family. The Alexanders were the Rothschilds of their day in the Roman Empire. They were the richest family in the empire, headquartered in Alexandria, Egypt, and they probably financed a lot of the construction of the gospel narrative. But they knew, but remember, a lot of their audience was illiterate and had to have this text read to them.
Oh, that's an interesting
at the
point.
synagogue.
The illiteracy of it all, because you went from graven images, idols, to Holy Scripture, Holy Writ, and that's kind of interesting because I would say that the average news consumer today is visually illiterate, and they need the pundits to tell them what's real and what's not real.
And they're historically illiterate as well. Most of them don't even remember the 1993 World Trade Center bombing, or maybe they were too young to remember it. And to say, well, all that happened was they
You're right. I mean,
they upgraded the movie script for 9/11. You know,
I saw a TikToker say, "Oh, 9/11 isn't that?" Because they were talking about Osama bin Laden and where he was interred, and some commenter was like, "I thought Osama bin Laden was in the first plane, like he was he hijacked the plane, he blew it."
Yeah. Well,
and
that's the shallow.
I was
that's
happy.
The shallowness of memory. It's memory shallow. Boy, more Mandela crap. The memory is so shallow that you can use a typology. You can take these old mythical themes that were already kind of familiar. They're floating around in people's consciousness because they heard these stories told in another context. And if you change a detail here or there, well, instead of Pharaoh, it's Herod the Great. You know, and instead of the Jewish firstborn in Egypt, this time it's in the city of Bethlehem, or I guess in Judea.
Yeah, you're talking about the intentional rhyming of your propaganda, aligning it with previous stories. We talk about history rhyming, and that's what Joseph Atwill was saying, is that they constructed the Gospels to perfectly rhyme and coincide and fulfill prophecies. And what is predictive programming but preparation for the fulfillment of it in the news as a form of prophecy in a way?
So one could say that the 93 WTC FBI sting operation with this truck bomb in the basement, you could say it was predictive programming, but at the same time, there's typology involved. Because once again, we have the Islamic terrorists, right? Except this time on 9/11, these same Islamic terrorists are flying planes into the towers. Oh yeah, weren't they the ones who tried to truck bomb the WTC? You know, and interestingly enough, on the morning of 9/11, I remember every detail of the reporting of that because I knew it was. First of all, I knew it was an inside job. Here's when I knew it was an inside job. I was sitting there. When I got to work that morning, it was Howard Stern who announced the first hit. He said, "Oh, planes crashed into the World Trade Center. It must be an accident." And then he said, "Oh, it looks like." And then when I got to work, they were evacuating the building that I worked in. So it was a beautiful day. So I said, well, you know, I figured it would be another hour before people returned into the building. So I went around the corner to a coffee shop there on Baltimore Street where, you know, I had a bunch of friends there that worked as baristas and, you know, used to hang out there. And I was sitting outside. They had tables set up outside. Sitting outside, drinking my cappuccino. And one of the baristas, they knew I was following the narrative. One of the baristas ran out and said, "Hey, Lynn, they say a truck bomb just went off at the Pentagon." A truck bomb went off at the Pentagon. I said, "What?" And then 10 minutes later, the same barista came out and said, "Well, now they changed the story. They just said a plane crashed into the Pentagon." I stood right up and I said, "Well, that's impossible." They said, "Yeah, a Boeing commercial jet." I said, "That's ridiculous. NORAD wouldn't let a Boeing commercial jet anywhere near Washington, D.C. That's insane." I said, "And if that happened, oh my God, the Joint Chiefs of Staff is going to have to talk about Pearl Harbor, because at Pearl Harbor, after Pearl Harbor, they court-martialed Admiral Kimmel and Major General Short, who were the top military commanders there. They took the rap. They were scapegoated for this horrible, unthinkable failure at Pearl Harbor.
Pearl Harbor, 12/7. Building 1, Building 2, Building 7. There's some interesting Pearl Harbor 9/11 connections. And yes, 9/11 was also another Pearl Harbor event. Pearl Harbor was called Operation AI, which is 19, like 19 hijackers. All these events are predictive programming for one another. They're part of a sequence. And I think that this is.
I went home.
Yeah.
I stood up when they said, oh, no, they're saying a big, fat Boeing commercial jet just crashed into the wall. I said, that's impossible. I said, there's no way NORAD would have allowed that to happen. I mean, it's the most heavily guarded fortress on planet Earth, that Pentagon. That's insane. The whole federal district is a grid. I said, this has got to be an inside job, and they're going to have to scapegoat some people for this because it's unthinkable that that would have been allowed to happen. I said, and that means the Secretary of Defense, the Joint Chiefs of Staff, NORAD commanders, they're all going to have to resign or be court-martialed. And I went home that night convinced that we were going to see resignations and court, that somebody was going to have to take the rap for this, the blame for this. I turned on C-SPAN, and lo and behold, John Warner and Carl Levin, who were the majority and minority chairs of the Armed Services Committee, they just went through this pro forma proceeding where they formalized the appointment of the acting head of the Joint Chiefs of Staff at the time, who was Meyer. General. Boy, I can't believe I'm forgetting all this. Air Force General Richard Myers. You know, the guy who should have been court-martialed for this. They were congratulating him on his handling of the situation, and they said, and they officially approved because he had been. It was very interesting.
But it's very maddening because it doesn't. No one responded like they should have, and
right.
That's
it was insane.
It's insane for people like you who pay attention. Most people just.
Yeah, the people who pay attention, it was insane. But most people, those dirty Arabs, they're dirty Muslims. They did it to us. Well, wait a minute, dude. Aren't you looking at what's happening here? Why are you allowed? See, this is what just. I thought.
And of course, their frame of reference is things they've seen on TV, bad guys that have been presented by Hollywood. And look how smoothly they've transitioned from Quran radicals to QAnon radicals, from Taliban to MAGA band, from ISIS to. I guess the MAGA is like the American ISIS, the white Al Qaeda, and of course we're looking at I think a template, right. 100% a template.
Vanilla ISIS.
Yeah, vanilla ISIS. Al Qaeda means the base. It means the base or the foundation.
It also, by the way, means the toilet.
Interesting. Okay,
yes,
well,
because it's where you sit, and the base where you sit. You know, it's really that's. I'm told that in Arabic it has kind of a dual meaning, you know.
Well, the white nationalists that were supposedly planning to start attacking the power grid in the Pacific Northwest also go by the base. I'm like, wait, white Al Qaeda, like you can see how it's 100% a template, and they can manufacture a bad guy in the mind of the public, and then they manifest it. And right now, the terrorist of the day is the QAnon terrorist. They don't consider the environmentalists terrorists, the ones who basically block roads, set themselves on fire. But no, the public's primed for the next Timothy McVeigh.
So they reuse the same scripts over and over, but they change a detail here or there.
It's clever. I mean, think about this, Kate. If Osama bin Laden's big day was 9/11, it's kind of interesting because the white version of Osama bin Laden would be like Timothy McVeigh, and he was executed on a 6/11.
Absolutely.
A 6/11.
Absolutely.
At the age of 33, 90 days before 9/11. But you have all the same symbols, and 6/11, 9/11, it's an inversion. One's an external threat, an alien terrorist. The other one is domestic, violent extremist. Invert the 9 to a 6, and you can kind of see external, internal. But yeah, it's a template, 100%.
The 95 Oklahoma City bombing was a frame-up of the militia movement, just as 9/11, just as the 93 World WTC bombing, and then 9/11 was a narrative to frame up Muslims and Arabs as terrorists, right? I mean, it's all
great points. I mean, right now, the
frame up
head
of
of
humanity, framing the whole of humanity. COVID is a frame up of the whole of humanity because if you don't mask and get vaxxed, you're you're guilty. You're a criminal.
But this is a standard op, the framing up of the militias, because now you have Stuart Rhodes, founder of the Oath Keepers, who is basically painting up anybody who's a constitutionalist as now a terrorist. And they have him in quotes saying something about where's Nancy, just like that guy who broke into the Pelosi residence said. And yeah, these are operations. They created the American counterpart to Al-Qaeda in the minds of the masses. That way they can do a 9/11 that the masses will believe in. And we're still waiting for the white nationalist 9/11 event, in my opinion.
Alex Jones is really deeply complicit in this script, because he had Ashley Babbitt's husband on there twice, alleged husband on there twice. Don't tell me he didn't know that thing was a sloppy special effect.
You know what? He is okay. Alex Jones, 1, he's had his assets frozen. 2, he's gonna have to pay $1 billion for hurt feelings. But now, Jordan Peele, who's the director of, I believe it's called Nope. It's a recent UFO invasion. Anyway, Jordan Peele has done a number of films that are like horror films. Well, right now he's releasing an audio book or an audio podcast, and it's a horror called Quiet Part Loud. And it's about a right-wing talk show host who's so extreme with hate that it causes violence or something. But basically, he loses his platform.
That's a reworking of the Oliver Stone script for talk radio. Anybody ever seen?
I haven't.
Yeah, starring Eric Bogosian. He really steals the show, and it's a Howard Stern type character. Almost exactly modeled on Howard Stern. Have you never seen Oliver Stone's movie Talk Radio?
No.
And at the end, he gets Alan Berg. Actually, it is based on the alleged assassination of a talk radio host.
Ooh, that's interesting.
Named Alan Berg. He was out in Denver. I believe he was in Denver, Colorado. This is way back in.
This is a big tie-in then, because this Jordan Peele thing, Quiet Part Loud, is about the deplatforming of a hateful radio host. And if you remember, when Hicks gave Kevin Booth a script for the Limbaugh-like character that is believed to have become Jones, the script involved this host being killed at the end. But what happens to the Alan Berg? Is it a parallel story?
You think they're going to stage an assassination of Jones?
It would be in the script that Hicks gave to Kevin Booth, but supposedly the script involved one of his own fans. And I've seen this storyline played out in a couple of different shows already. Like there was one where there's this right-wing host based on Jones. I think it was in Colony, who instigates the assassination of a senator, and then he gets hit in retaliation. But yeah, that is the subtext to the Alex Hicks, Bill Hicks, Alex Jones story. So it's interesting to me that Jordan Peele is doing a story about a Jones-like character getting deplatformed.
Well, that's just like Jared Kushner hiring the publicist for The Purge to, to come up with the PR agitprop for Trump's campaign. And I believe "Make America Great Again" was originally a slogan of Ronald Reagan's.
Oh yes,
so it was never even it was for Trump. It was never even original. He just bought. I wonder if he had to pay copyright. Really, I wonder if he had to pay a copyright fee.
Well, when
to
Trump
use Ronald Reagan's original.
When he reemerged on the world stage politically,
Ronald Reagan was an actor, in case anybody has forgotten.
Yes,
he was a Hollywood actor who they made president.
Ronald Reagan and Star Wars and all that.
Yeah,
but
right.
When Trump started emerging on the world stage, I thought, this guy seems to be rhyming his whole campaign with Reagan. Make America Great Again. And I think even Reagan got his start. I think he even flew on one of Trump's planes. But I noticed there was a lot of intentional rhyming. Like Reagan was known for speaking, quote, above the heads of the media, talking directly to the silent majority of the people. And that's what Trump was doing with his rallies. He would call out the media, call them liars, and defer people to the online sources. Like, it looks to me like a great deal of repetition.
Yeah, I mean, clearly they modeled the Trump thing was supposed to be a populist movement. We've had populist movements in America before. The original one around William Jennings Bryan ended up taking over the Democratic Party, just as, Trump has sort of hijacked the Republicans, I guess, supposedly. But and to do that, you really got to start. You got to well, first of all, you have to give people a focus for their rage and their free-floating anxiety. But I got to ask you this. This is something that is kind of mystifying me a little bit. Do they allow Trump to stray off the reservation, or in fact, is he a prisoner of the vaccine narrative? Because he's really on the spot now. Many of the most enthusiastic MAGA people are anti-vaxxers, and that's because when Trump originally
think that he's
campaigned,
he definitely is taking credit for it. He's the vax father, and it's a huge contradiction because the orthodoxy has been anti. But yeah, as far as
have you seen the Candace Owens Trump?
Yes, the beef there is pretty interesting to me as well. And Candace Owens, 33, is the wife of the CEO of Parler, and then she shows up with Kanye West and the White Lives Matter shirts, and then Kanye buys Parler. A very interesting bit of world stage theater all around here.
Kanye West has called out Harley Pasternak, who I guess is sort of a celebrity physical trainer out there in Hollywood, some Canadian guy.
His MK Ultra handler, yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So to bring this up here, I find it curious to me. Kanye compared his life experience recently to the Truman Show, and I look at some of these people, like these supposed rogues, like Kanye and Trump, and I can see why it looks like they could be somewhat stray. Maybe they're going off the script, and they're
or
going
maybe
off the
not.
program, but.
Yeah, maybe it doesn't matter whether they're on this side or that side because both sides are controlled. It's what we call a directed dialectic. This goes back to the trust that the Bolsheviks started, organized, basically in order, the best way to control the opposition is to lead it, which is what Lenin's idea, that really they learned from the German general staff and from the British Empire how to do this, the Bolsheviks, and I have to say they deployed it very effectively. They created this phony opposition, this fake opposition called the Union of Russian Monarchists that was colloquially referred to as the Trust, mostly among émigrés, their political opponents in the capitals of Europe and in the United States, as a sort of focal point for resistance to the Bolsheviks. Felix Dzerzhinsky, the founder of the Cheka, he was covertly instructed by Lenin to set this thing up and to pick highly trusted Bolshevik leaders to infiltrate this thing that they were creating and guide it along, to sort of convince people that there's good guys on the inside of the Bolshevik Party. And
the White Hats. Yeah, early.
The White Hats,
that was definitely like the White Hats, hopium.
Right, and this was started in 1919. And by 1920, of course, Lenin was dead by 1925, and Stalin was pretty much consolidating his control. The Bolshevik control over the trust was so covert that Stalin was never informed. Stalin didn't even know about it. And it was being run by Felix Dzerzhinsky and his second-in-command, Trelicer. And they were using it to control and lure in these opponents, identify them and control them and keep them spinning their wheels on this treadmill with this hopium that there were white hats inside the party.
It worked.
Why else would the Bolsheviks allow this organization to exist in Russia unless they were really democratic? That's what people thought. But when Stalin found out about it, he was furious because he at first thought it was a legitimate opposition. And he called in, and then he found out that there were actually old Bolsheviks who were participating in it and running it. He called in Dzerzhinsky and said, "What the hell's going on here?" And Dzerzhinsky said, "Well, Lenin instructed us to do this, and we were instructed to do it. We were supposed to keep very quiet about it, so most of the party wouldn't know that we were really controlling it, so that it would really be seen as a legitimate opposition." And Stalin said, look, we've consolidated. It's 1925. Why are we still following the policy of a man who's been dead like 40? Lenin died in like 23, I think. He says, why are we still following the policy of a dead man? I'm in charge now. And we no longer have to disguise who we are and what we stand for. Power is power. We don't have to conceal it.
It did work, you're right.
Stalin ordered.
They did in fact recreate Operation Trust very well, and Parler, which I just mentioned.
QAnon.
But yeah, exactly. But before the 1-6...
Well, MAGA and QAnon, of course, really.
Yes,
the whole Trump thing is a controlled opposition.
It's all part of it, and he's the Judas goat. And if you look at Parler, which Kanye is buying, right in the lead up to 1-6, that was one of the main sites, the alternative Twitter, where everything was being planned before they rug pulled it by taking its servers and pulling it off Apple and Google. But to get onto Parler, you had to give your phone number and upload your driver's license to get an approved account.
Elon Musk's new version of Twitter.
Oh yes, yeah, the
you got to give them
controlled demo there.
Right.
But I'm like, wait a minute here. All these people on the right who are insurrection friendly are giving their information, their driver's licenses, their phone numbers to Parler, and then it gets, quote, hacked. And I'm like, okay, I'm in that hack. Whoever hacked it has my info. And I was fine with that because I'm doing journalism and doing research. I have to go into these places. But what an obvious setup. Because now anybody who's interested in an insurrection or in fomenting that kind of delay of the proceedings, well, they know your name and number and address.
Stalin, let me tell you the bottom line on this. Stalin was so, he had a big ego. He was so furious when he discovered that this was really being run by the Bolsheviks. He said, what are we doing, allowing these people to operate inside our new Soviet Union? They're trying to overthrow us. What are we allowing this to? And Dzerzhinsky came in and explained to him what the original design of it was. Stalin was furious that he had been left out of the loop on this. And he said, I want all of them rounded up and shot. And Dzerzhinsky said, well, wait a minute, you can't do this because a lot of them, the ones running it, are some of our most loyal old-time Bolsheviks. You're going to order their execution? And his second in command, Trelicer, came in and said, well, you might as well put my name at the top of that list because I'm not going to let this happen. These are all our comrades that you're about to shoot for being part of this fake opposition. And Stalin said, he said, I'm going to have them all shot. I'm going to cross your name off. And he did. He used it as a pretext to get rid of a lot of old Bolsheviks who were covertly it's so crazy when you look at it, but that's what they will do. That's what they'll do to the left, the Antifa types and the BLM types, when they're done with them.
Oh, yeah. I wouldn't be surprised if you were to, I mean, look at Antifa and Patriot Front and tell me that Patriot Front isn't just the right-wing Antifa. And one of the clues here is the founder of the Patriot Front is named Thomas Rousseau. The name Rousseau is synonymous with the French Revolution. And we're looking at,
right.
But I'm like Antifa, Patriot Front, show me the difference. And they all wear masks. How convenient.
Well, this leads me to wonder whether Trump, in fact, has allowed some of these authentic followers who were there on January 6th to be rotting in solitary confinement for the last 2 years when he could have pardoned all of them. Really, he had enough time to pardon all of them. But whether he's allowing them to be... See, you say they're all crisis actors, but I don't think every one of them is. I think they've managed to identify, track, and round up a lot of people who are sort of genuine opponents of the New World Order in their kind of naive way, who were lured into this January 6th operation.
Oh, look, they could have provoked
people
into breaking...
And Trump is allowing them to be sacrificed.
Yes.
Trump allowed them to be sacrificed.
Yes, you could have a number of people who, of their own volition, would break laws, collude, and get themselves entrapped. This was a huge honeypot, I think. I just think that the main action was actors, and I think it was more feds. I think, but yeah, obviously there could have been some
Yeah,
people
Ray
slipping.
Epps. Ray Epps definitely was there telling people to go inside. He's an FBI guy.
And I think that
are
Baked
you-
Alaska. I think Baked Alaska's a Fed. I really do. I think
yes.
it's a Fed saying,
Yeah, and
"Hey,
also
don't."
Gavin McInnes, also another one of these.
Gavin
Gavin
McSmollett. Gavin McSmollett.
Yeah,
I've dubbed him.
yeah, he's a Fed for sure. And are you familiar with Hitler's Night of the Long Knives?
Yes.
Right. So this is where these were some of the oldest and most loyal. These are the street fighters of the NSDAP. The brown shirts, Ernst Röhm and his people. They really did a lot of the street fighting on the road to power, beginning from 1923 right on up till the National Socialists finally, in a coalition, got voted into power in 1933, and the army, the old Reich Army generals who were aristocrats, they didn't like these street brawling types. And many of whom were veterans of World War I, by the way. Röhm and his crew were had been soldiers in World War I, but they were very radical, and they were socialist. They were super socialist. They wanted to have a second revolution. They said, we're in power now. Go ahead and nationalize all the banks, and we're going to abolish, capitalism and have a true national socialism. They really believed in national socialism. And Himmler basically needed the agreement of the German General Staff to the National Socialists consolidating their power. But the price that the German General Staff demanded and the regular army run by Junkers, aristocratic officers, demanded was the elimination of this wild card, these old-time National Socialist brown shirts, street fighters. And Hitler had them all, and also Ernst Röhm and his crowd were super homosexual. they would have these gay orgies and stuff like that, and Hitler had always overlooked this. He said he didn't care about that.
Well, Patriot Front is all male, and Proud Boys. I mean,
yeah.
I mean, there may be something
gay element there, huh?
Well, it may be some kind of, I don't know, some kind of thing. I'm not sure exactly, but these are definitely patterned, and I think they're all pretty much spooks. I mean, they're all feds. When the Patriot Front was revealed, there were 33 of them jumping out of the back of a U-Haul, very dramatic. Well, it turns out that they were feds, according to one of the police there. He said, oh, some of those guys were insiders. They were agents. And it's like, well, how many of the 33 were agents and how many were dupes? I'm inclined to think it's like pretty much all of them are on the inside.
See, I think there are dupes, and I think these dupes are sacrificed. Just as the Bolsheviks sacrificed, just as Stalin was perfectly willing to sacrifice all these loyal Bolsheviks who are pretending to be opponents of the regime in this...
well, sure, we have seen, like here, we've observed and noted the use of parolees, people scraped off the bottom of the worst places in the prisons and put to use in disinformation and limited
Darrell Brooks, the Waukesha crazy SUV driver, because apparently he had an extensive criminal record, and for petty shit, but they may actually be using him in this way. I don't want to. I don't want to rush
it wouldn't
to
surprise
judgment.
me. It wouldn't surprise me, but like Homeland Security admitted that they were trying to manufacture terrorists for Trump out of Antifas, and it could be that they instigate and they have actors, a mixture of both. But yeah, and someone even pointed out here that that there's a good likelihood that Trump is allowing real fans to become martyrs for him.
If you were Robbie Parker, would you want to, and they said, hey, we need you to show up at the to testify for this Alex Jones trial. And Robbie Parker's already, to me, he's completely useless. He's already compromised by that famous video of him laughing and hyperventilating as he gets ready to play his role.
Only to critical thinkers.
Wouldn't you want to drop out? I mean, wouldn't you want, if you were a crisis actor or Wayne Sexton, after a while, after you've been in so many of these things, or after you'd kind of been exposed, wouldn't you want to like fade away and disappear, like Seth Rich, or wouldn't you just like want to disappear? I mean, you wouldn't want to
I
keep
think
showing
so
up
too.
again and again and
But
again,
like,
unless you were so compromised you had no choice but to do everything they told you to do.
yeah, or your character. Like I look at somebody like Kyle Rittenhouse, and the amount of hate directed toward him, I would have thought that he would have gone witness protection, especially right after Kenosha. But instead, he becomes kind of a Steven Crowder light, some kind of annoying right-wing jester, media figure. And I'm thinking that's
Who's
the
really,
opposite of what you would expect for.
who's really broken this down? Russ Winter of Winter Watch. Man, you got to see if you could do an interview with him. Maybe he'll agree. Of course, he probably doesn't like flat earthers. I don't know how he feels about alternative cosmology. A lot of people, I'm finding this.
Well, I don't know how I feel about CGI ball earthers these days. It's kind of two ways, but maybe we can meet in the middle.
You're right. You're right. I agree with you. Regardless of where you stand on this, people should be open. Once we know that NASA's so full of shit, we don't know what the hell's up with cosmology. I have my own worldview.
I know who you're talking about, though. I know who you're talking about. You sent me something from him where he broke down in nuance the various faces of Joe Biden and how it's just crazy when you really get down to it, how many different versions there are.
That's not all he's done. He's thoroughly deconstructed what you were just talking about, the Darrell Brooks Waukesha thing. And
yeah,
what was the
Kyle.
Other thing? Kyle Rittenhouse. He has really done a total breakdown showing how Kyle Rittenhouse is an actor. And it's completely scripted, and like Kyle Rittenhouse saying he likes BLM. You remember that?
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, he has a whole explanation for that, how it plays into the narrative. And
Kyle, I mean, 17-year-old white hat, front row at a Trump rally before the Kenosha thing.
Yeah. And Russ Winter I think, has done a very detailed analysis of a lot of these things, and I feel like he's on the same page with us. I really do. But, shoot him an email or say, hey, I've had requests to interview you.
I find that, look, I mean, I would never say that I'm a flat earther or whatever. I mean, just like I wouldn't say I'm a globe earther. I have my reasons.
Right.
But whenever I'm approaching...
I call myself a globe earth skeptic.
Yeah, skeptic, shape agnostic. But when I approach somebody who might be put off by that, I generally try to send them a list of questions in advance so they know where the conversation's going. I'm not trying to entrap somebody into any sort of tangents, but I'm very interested in media deconstructionism as a methodology, and I like to see what conclusions others have arrived at with how they analyze things.
Yes, I know that there are probably people out there that get cold feet when they have to, in terms of the whole notion of alternative cosmologies, because they're so used to, it's been so ground into them, this whole Copernican, Keplerian, geocentric model, which really is, it's nowhere near as precise as Tycho Brahe's geocentric model, really, in terms of data. The data supports Tycho Brahe's geocentric model for sure, where the Earth is stationary and everything's, rotating, up there, and the sky clock is basically sort of rotating around the Earth, as we call it.
Well, most people get stuck at this. They get stuck at why would they fake it? And here's my answer. My short answer is, even if they're not faking the shape, if they're not representing it to us accurately, if they're giving us a misrepresentation, they could be hiding land. And why would that matter? Well, all of their computer models for their climate science it's all predicated on the Earth as represented. And if they're misrepresenting it, any aspect of it, it throws these models out. And I think we haven't been given a complete enough picture. There's enough room for doubt that, to me, that's why it matters. It matters because a false worldview leads to false conclusions.
Exactly. But that doesn't mean you have to start out with a conclusion. You can keep an open mind and be skeptical and say which model is predictive modeling can be tested. Of course, when you talk about the star clock and Polaris and all that, we do have a few thousand years of records and data that it can be the basis for studying this. But to me, what I see in the sky is nothing more than an optical effect. It's you know, you can be at the beach and get sunburned in the water because the reflection of the sun. You can be wearing a hat or an umbrella and still get sunburned from the reflection of the sun on the water. But the sun is still it's an optical effect that generates heat. There's no doubt about that. But if I'm looking at a lake, at a reflection of the sun or the moon on a body of water, well, how do I know that what I'm looking out there in the sky is not simply a refraction or a reflection of something else? I don't necessarily know that it's a real object unless I got a piece of it in my hand. You know what I'm saying? It's an optical effect. That's all we can say about what's in the sky. The stars, the so-called planets, the celestial objects, the constellations, the moon, especially the moon. They're optical effects that could be reflections of something else. With the proviso that in fact the sun does actually generate heat, it radiates heat, and even the reflection of the sun radiates heat. You know,
in other words, you're not denying the observed, experienced reality. We're just questioning the supposed explanations, and there are so many built-in presuppositions into like the heliocentric model and the stars, as far as they say, well, if the world isn't what they say, then those distances wouldn't be valid, and that's a huge difference. And that's why when we talk about this stuff, people who are only looking at it from the frame of reference they've been given, the heliocentric model, they assume you're talking about a disk floating in space. And I'm like, no, if we rule out the Earth being a ball, then everything about the size and the distances of the sun, the moon, the stars, it all changes. Yeah.
Right. The red boat experiment with the P900 scope, or for that matter, being able to see the skyline of Chicago from across Lake Michigan, that proves that the waters are flat. No doubt about it. Bodies of water are flat. But water always falls to, becomes level. It resolves to a level surface. Now, the land itself is very uneven. It goes up, it goes down. We have mountains, we have valleys, but we also have large stretches of flat desert.
Yeah, like where I live. I live in a very flat desert, and people say, oh, boats go over the horizon. Well, because of where the sun is right now, near sunset, I can actually see a field full of turbines that are 95 miles away. And I can see them. They look like little white stars in front of the mountain that's 120 miles away. And I'm looking at these things, and I'm like, wait a minute here. If I'm looking at a boat going over a hump of water, how come I'm staring nearly 100 miles away?
But the boat doesn't go over the hump of water if you got a P9. It looks like it's going over the hump of water to the naked eye. But if you look through a P900 scope, you say, oh, there's the boat. I can see it now. I'm saying really, really high-powered telescopes completely destroy that whole it's not going over the horizon. If you can extend your vision far enough, it never disappears.
And what does that do to the main argument that 99% of the people reach for? Oh, everybody knows because the ancient Greeks saw boats go over the horizon. Well, we just contradicted that. Shouldn't you reassess?
It's a total misrepresentation. And who is to say that the Earth is of any fixed shape? Who's to say that it's not undulating and oscillating and vibrating and that its shape is constantly changing? All we know is that the waters are flat. And as you say, we have vast stretches of desert that are, for all practical purposes, flat, well beyond any, proposed curvature of the Earth. We really don't. And when we look at the sky, what we see are optical effects, one of which generates heat, which is what we call the sun, or radiates heat. I shouldn't say generate, because we don't know that heat is coming from the sun directly. It could be a reflection, because if a mirror, a reflection of the sun on the mirror you can get burned from that. As I say, I've been at the ocean and gotten sunburned from even wearing a hat or an umbrella in the water because the water reflects the heat of the sun upward and can sunburn you over time. So
it's a fascinating topic. Like I tend to stick with the NASA fakery more because
yes.
it's about perception. Whereas when you get into the shape of the world, it's one of these things. It's almost cosmology, cosmography. Exactly. It's a big picture. It's important and it's philosophical. But
right.
I
So
think that,
if this should come up,
yeah.
If you want to interview somebody like a Russ Winter, he says, well, I have a problem with this, infinite plane flat Earth, or what are you saying? Are you a flat? You could say, well, that's provisional. We don't know yet. That's speculative cosmology, and we feel because we determined that NASA's blue marble was totally the creator of the blue marble admitted it was a digital fake because we know this, and we know if we're supposed to have satellites in orbit, but we never get we never get an authentic image of the Earth as a ball. That's bullshit. They're making that up. Then all bets are off. All bets are off, and we're into the realm of speculative cosmology.
Yes,
and you can say, well, that's
cosmology.
purely
I like
speculative.
That.
That's
I like
what
that though,
is.
because science isn't supposed to be settled. New facts, you got to change things, and we don't have all the answers. Even
more data is needed. More data is needed. We don't have enough data, and the data we've been provided with, it turns out, is fake.
Therefore,
fabricated.
It's premature to have a conclusive model. And they can't fault us when they say, where's your flat Earth map? It's like, well, where's your map of the universe that tells me what's at the edge? We're all left falling short of the total big picture. We just disagree on, what the picture is beyond what we can physically verify without the aid of course, CGI models.
I had a curious encounter with this a couple weeks ago. So, I'm at the age where they wanted me to go in, for a colonoscopy. Every 5 years, they want you to go in for a colon scan. I went in there, and one of the nurses, I got into a discussion with her about, medication for hypertension and all that. She says, well, I'm on it too, but I didn't like it. One of them, they had to replace it with another, and we were discussing this, one of the nurses. I said, well, you look awful young to be on blood pressure medication. She looked at me. She said, well, I'm 61. She was in great shape for 61. She says, I'm 61. I said, wow. I said, the first thing I always say when I see somebody who's old but in great shape is, what's your workout? What's your workout? And she said, oh, I do this, I do that. She said, but I was planning, before the COVID thing, I was ready to take a trip to Antarctica. She says, I'm definitely going to go to Antarctica. And she was really emphatic about this. Here I was about to be put under with anesthesia for this colonoscopy, and she's telling me that she was serious. She said, I'm planning to go to Antarctica, but I had to call it off because of the COVID thing, and it screwed everything up. And I looked at her and I said, oh my God, I said, you're not a flat earther, are you? And she looked at me and she kind of grinned and sort of, shook her shoulders a little bit, and then I was out with the anesthesia. The discussion was over. But, people, I think, they know NASA's full of shit. And so they're going to want answers. That's what's happening here. Obviously, very intelligent, thinking, independent-minded people, they're going to want answers. And they will pursue whatever their dream is to get these answers. And her dream is to go to Antarctica. It's the most important thing in her life that she wants to do. I was kind of really struck by that.
I think that there should be as much interest among the anti-flat earthers as there are on the pro-flat earthers as to solving this conclusively to the satisfaction of even the most intransigent flat earther. If I was on that side, I'd be like, I'm going to Antarctica and I'm going to come out the other side and I'm going to laugh at you all. And nobody's doing that. They're just letting the question go out there and they're just attacking anybody who asks the question. Meanwhile, none of the flat earthers are ever talking about going far, far south. They just talk about, well, these days the conversation's been muted by the media and they've destroyed any sizable community around it where they could actually crowdsource some kind of, exploration.
the discourse has definitely been compromised and corrupted and sidetracked and infiltrated, as you, I think, demonstrate brilliantly in Behind the Perv. A great documentary. I always push that on people if they're even remotely interested in alternative cosmologies, and flat Earth. I say, hey, you got to see Behind the Perv, and people do like it. They really do like it. It always gets a positive response because it shows the political infiltration of this thing. So it must be a really dangerous idea. They wouldn't be, and as you said, YouTube banned flat Earth discussion at a certain point, right? Why
Yeah,
would they
that's the
bother
main
to do
thing.
that?
We had, for people who weren't there was a time up until about 2018 where you would have Google Hangouts and groups of people talking all night long, all sides of the fence, just talking, discussing, and it was constructive, it was entertaining, but it was organic, it was real, and they blocked it because they said that YouTube was converting people to flat Earth because of Alex Jones, who's not even a flat earther, who's a complete moon landing believer. But anyway, yeah, they actually had to stop the conversation from going on, along with the public demand for it. And to me, that's fascinating. They just unanimously decided, you guys can't talk about this. You can talk about Bigfoot, you can talk about aliens, but don't question this. And to me, that's a good sign. It says pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. They're obviously hiding something.
Well, it's the same thing with so-called chemtrails and stratospheric aerosol geoengineering. They kind of want us to see something, but what's behind it, it's not real clear. What they're actually doing is not real clear. I really love those hangouts, when they were at their height. It's some brilliant people. I used to tune those in, and you'd have 6 or 7 people on the screen, and some of them are really, they're mathematicians and people who a lot of self-educated people, and I learned so much from those discussions. It really opened my mind. One group in particular around Lori Frary and her Flat Earth Conspiracy group. Very sharp people. They were networking and everything else, and it's pretty clear why they had to shut it down. They just couldn't tolerate that kind of, questioning of
right. They didn't like the serious minds, even to debunk it. They don't want serious minds devoting their attention to debunking it because that's the path to, wait a minute, what am I actually trying to debunk? Instead, they want to make it look like it's unserious, it's a bunch of clowns, and anybody who asks these questions is somehow deficient in some way. And that smear campaign has been it's been so effective that the last Flat Earth Conference didn't call itself a Flat Earth Conference. They called themselves, quote, True Earthers.
Yeah, I noticed that. And did Owen Benjamin also host that, or what? What did he participate in that as well?
I think the next one. I think the one that he's going to be in, and Alex Stein as well. They're like the headliners, but it's all going to be through Zoom conference. It's going to be a Zoom conference thing anyway. But yeah, True Earth.
Well, which is better. Yeah, why do people physically need to be in one? Fly out to one place to do these things? Who started all that were these.
Right, spreading chemtrails everywhere. Just stay home.
Yeah, it was Jordan Sather and David Wilcox, and really creepy people, grifters. They used to run these conferences and basically use it to collect a lot of money and sell their crap. And the coffee enema people. I shouldn't ridicule that. And there might be something to it. I shouldn't prejudge that.
No. Actually, I never heard about that until, weirdly enough, there was a conversation between Crow 77777 and Owen Benjamin, and they were talking about that. And I was thinking, maybe that's what's causing the lunar wave. Crow 777's got so much caffeine in his system that his camera hand is shaky.
It's funny you mention that because I learned about all this by way of Unirock. He was really trying to discredit all these people, and it was easy to do because some of them really, Jordan Sather in particular is a real scum. He's a lowlife. They would get a certain class of people out there, in many cases sort of older middle-aged women who for some reason would cluster around these individuals, and give them their money and everything. And the other group was, of course, Alfred Weber and and Michael Salla and the exopolitics people. You know, they're like the UFO crap. Well, all this ufology crap and the secret space program, that's what they call it, the secret space program. Yeah, right. Well, you know, the answer to that, as you pointed out, is Mirage Men. That's clearly, that's the trust, right? That's sort of a false, controlled opposition being run in the field of alternative cosmology to try to divert it, take it off, guardrail it, you know, gatekeep it.
Yeah, for people who don't know, Mirage Men's
and also
a documentary.
grifters, yeah, and also grift off of it because they're always out for money.
Yes.
Jordan Sather in particular is a money grubbing.
The Mirage Men would be the agents that are there to control the loose, leaked information by steering it into conspiracies they can control. And these Mirage Men generally function as more or less grifters. They're somehow getting revenue off of it, and they're milking the crowd for the information they're peddling, which is usually connected to intelligence services. And the Mirage Men documentary was actually about a local event, the Kirtland Air Force Base. Apparently, a conspiracy theorist was blogging about what he was seeing from the base. So the base sent special agents into his life to make friends with him and pretend to be conspiracy theorists, and they fed him all kinds of stories about abductions and aliens from Venus coming here to take our water, among other things. But yeah, the alien abduction stories came from the Air Force here locally. They admit this.
Did I ever tell you about someone I knew who worked at Area 51? No. I used to hang out with at the coffee shop that I was telling you about down in Baltimore, and he had been in the Air Force, and he had worked at Groom Lake facility, Area 51 as it's called colloquially. And I said, "Well, what did you see?" He said, I was just there loading and unloading trucks, and I got leukemia. About a year later, I got leukemia, and he was collecting disability from the VA. Apparently, they acknowledged that what the material he'd been handling, I don't know whether it was like nuclear material, which can be very toxic. I understand some of it, and that's how he caught leukemia. But one way or another, he was on permanent disability for like the rest of his life because they said that he'd gotten the leukemia from loading and unloading these secret whatever you want to call it, out of pallets of material out at Area 51 at Groom Lake. And that was all he knew about it. That's really all he knew about it. He said, "I never really saw anything unusual out there." He said, "I know they were testing stuff, but I never saw anything." But that's the closest I've come to actually meeting somebody. You know, and that's the only time I've ever known somebody who worked out at Groom Lake in Area 51. And I thought that was kind of interesting, though. He wasn't the least bit curious about it, really.
Well, okay, Area 51, of course, Roswell and all this stuff, very interesting. The Roswell crash was in Corona Field, 1947. But 1946 was the year of the Jack Parsons, Marjorie Cameron, L. Ron Hubbard, Babylon working. And that was the year that was actually the first UFO sighting having been reported, and it was Marjorie Cameron. The woman hanging out with Hubbard and Parsons, the priestess in the ritual, is actually the first UFO witness, and that was a year before Roswell.
It's all witchcraft to me. They do spells on people and keep people preoccupied with it.
Oh yeah, it's fascinating too when you consider that you have Jack Parsons and L. Ron Hubbard, basically progenitor of modern rocket science, or major godfather rocket fuel, slow-burning rocket fuel, with the godfather of science fiction, space religion, Scientology, the creator of it. I mean, that is really, to me, the fusion that created our modern worldview. Science fiction, movie magic, and mystery Babylon, which is what
Disney played a pivotal role in that, of course. The whole Disney
Yes,
empire.
we live in a Disney universe, and we still do. I mean, we do. We live in a Disney universe. It's a cartoon when you go above the Carmen line, from what I've seen.
Yeah. Well, I've run around the corral on this, so I probably should
Yeah, actually,
bid
hey,
you goodbye at
it's
this
been
point.
great catching up with you, Lynn. Everybody loves your calls. Good to hear from you again, and everyone who missed out.
How's the?
Yeah.
Yeah. Continue to give us updates on the pursuit of your legal case against this slime. Well,
I'll drop
we
a couple
want to know
updates.
more about that.
I'll give a couple updates here because I just put out a press release on the topic. All right. Well, hey, great for a great call. Thanks for calling, and we'll catch up again.
Take care.
Awesome. All right. Let's see here. Yeah, a couple of updates on the suits. Okay. Well, for those who don't know, the main thing against me has been cyber squatting, and there are 35 or 40 domains that were stolen in order to direct traffic away from Infinite Plane Society, Infinite Plane Radio. Admittedly, these bad faith domain registrations to steal traffic, it's a form of piracy. It's a major, it's a property crime. It's called cyber squatting. The Anti-Cyber Squatting Protection Act explains why this violates certain fair trade practices. It's very destructive. Anyway, the person who has been buying these domains to suppress this channel also falsely claimed to be me, claimed that my voice was his to YouTube's legal department in 2018. So, since 2018, anytime this guy puts a copyright strike against my content, they take it down because he's me from their perspective. Well, I got a copy of the email he sent to YouTube's legal. I showed this to the FCC. I reported YouTube and this person to the FBI IC3 cybercrimes, and I was told by someone at the FCC that we're looking at felony identity theft. And it's not just the private individual, but YouTube is complicit. I'm not sure if they colluded knowingly, but they've been involved in this. So one of the reasons why we've had 150 plus YouTube channels is that according to YouTube and according to Spotify, I think now, because the reason why Spotify pulled our podcasts off is they said somebody claims that they own the podcast. Well, who do you think that person is? Now, as far as where it's going, it's getting to be interesting. We'll see where it goes. But my next move is next month I'm filing suit against YouTube for identity theft. And I'm basically suing YouTube and this person together in order to hopefully put a spotlight on this and get some kind of grand jury indictment against this individual. And I think YouTube's legal will help me in this regard. I've been working on this for some time. It's been difficult, mainly because this person is hard to serve papers because he works for, well, he's known to the White House travel agency. He's with George News. But YouTube's a part of it. That's my point. YouTube is complicit, and I have evidence. And I put out a press release basically saying I reported YouTube to the FBI, and I have the email headers to prove it. There is no doubt everything I'm saying is 100% true, and they owe this channel big. And the reason why they owe this channel big, in my view, is because were it not for the active suppression, it would be completely different right now. But I think we can make up for lost time. Now, the other lawsuit was one I instigated. It was a cyber stalker, and this person had doxed hundreds of people who were just talking about alternative cosmology. Anyhow, I doxed this person and I sued this person for defamation because the person was emailing employers to get me fired, emailing advertisers to pull funding when I was with the Dark Matter Network, and eventually resulted in my termination there temporarily. My point is, I sued him and he pulled everything about me from his site down. Therefore, I was thinking, okay, he's backing off. And I backed off. I didn't bother driving out to Ohio to deal with it. It's just a civil case anyway. Well, his ego was bruised, so he filed a retaliation suit, which to me is malicious prosecution, and the fact that it's unwinnable, in my view. And by the way, the case is closed. Whatever came of it, we'll see. Probably nothing. He sued me for $642,000. Again, I sue him for defamation and cyber stalking. He sues me for $642,000, claiming that when I vandalized one of his memes, or I remixed a meme of his, I put my mascot with the beak on a piece of clip art that's on his website. He said it was trademark libel, trademark infringement, and I was sued for $600,000. His attorney costs that he spent fighting this channel, $30,000, and then hurt feelings, $12,000. $12,000. So I guess he only cried 12,000 tears, not the 1 trillion tears from the Sandy hookers. Well, there you go, 642,000. Now, where is this case going? I don't know. I didn't go because, well, the judge didn't let me add Marcus Goldfinch, my cyber squatter, as a co-defendant at the last minute, which I tried to do because all of those stolen domains were being directed towards this person's defamation site. I mean, it's kind of interesting how all my trolls kind of work together. And YouTube, of course, being a soon to be a co-defendant, just adds to this. But anyway, just a few minor updates. There will be more in the near future. But the fact is, this channel has been accustomed to being not really censored so much as, I mean, because when we're talking about censorship, that's the government. We're talking about more or less terms of service enforcement. But in my case, it's not even terms of service violations. We're talking about malicious actors exploiting the system. And YouTube makes it easy. Every one of these platforms, they make it easy to censor somebody. You know, I mentioned this earlier, I should mention it again. Lloyd Miller had his Discord server pulled, which is crap. I mean, that's like burning a book. If you can cheer the censorship of a channel, you are a book burner. The person who had my channels pulled would, look, if you're going to take my podcast off of all these people's podcast players, you're doing the same thing as, I'm going to take it upon myself to go into their homes and pull these books off their shelves. I don't want to read it. I don't want anybody else to read it. Whatever happened to, I may not agree with what you have to say, but I'll defend your right to say it, which is Voltaire, which is very relevant to what we're doing here. We're talking about a writer who had to work around censorship by disguising his work as fiction. I mean, we're reliving quite a lot here. I think right now we're pretty much up against an age of endarkenment. I think they are definitely using media to put blinders on people. I mean, it's fascinating to watch this descent into a dark age where everyone is convinced they know more than they've ever known. And this visual dumbing down has been achieved by going from organic effects and real actors to bad CGI on purpose. Decades of bad CGI makes it difficult for you to tell the fake news from the real stuff. Diana Sal says, they try to wear you down, but it makes you stronger. Yeah, well, we've evolved. The think tank is the main thing they try to censor. It's not me. It's the real-time interaction with dozens of people, human intel. It's the callers, it's the chatters, it's the interaction that they hate. Like, if you think about it, traditional radio has always been very gate-kept. You have the host and you have the listeners. The listeners don't know each other. They're scattered around. The host is in a one-to-one relationship with the listeners. That's kind of like in a university or a school setting. The teacher talking to the students. Yeah, there's a big group, but it's all one-to-one. No passing notes. That's cheating. Now, what we've done here is it's the same kind of platform. We're broadcasting. It's one person, but what we've done with the chat is now we're all in the same classroom. We're all passing notes, and I can read the notes that are being passed. This is different from the gate kept. There's no gates, there's no fencing between the listeners themselves. And that's what is different about our think tank, that level of interaction. And the results speak for themselves. And we've been on this for several years, and the things we've been doing have been, I think, evolving a more refined approach to examining what media is and analyzing our hyper-mediated environment, the immersive illusion that we all exist in, and then we're also examining what does it mean to exist in an immersive illusion and to be aware of it, but to be surrounded by people who aren't. I've likened this to being an atheist in a fundamentalist society, or an atheist to that God. There's a difference in worldview, and that's what we're looking at here. It's worldview warfare. Infinite Muse says cheering censorship is insanity. Yeah, look, I'm not anti-vaxxer. I'm not pro-vaxxer. I'm not anti-pro-vaxxer. I'm not I'm just like, think and let think. And in my view, this censorship is the same thing as saying we don't trust you with the wrong answers. You just have to listen to our right answers. That's a form of ignorance. We want you to be ignorant about the wrong. We don't want you to know the difference between right and wrong. I mean, to me, this is like suggesting that the real answers, that the red pills, are like the forbidden fruit, and they want you to remain perpetually in a state of ignorance. And I think that's kind of what I mean when I say we're moving into a dark age, because the more ideas they put out beyond the fringe, beyond the edge of acceptable discourse, the more the darkness dominates the universe of ideas, and they're reducing and shrinking the universe of acceptable ideas. My objective here is to take the censored stuff, specifically the anti-this stuff, the stuff I don't even agree with, and I will put it into print. Infinite Plane Press is part of one of our future things here. We have Infinite Plane Radio, which is the voice of Infinite Plane Society, but we need to go into print. And it's not just that I want to put it in print, as in paper, magazine, newspaper, books, but I want the books to contain QR codes to links to audio versions to hear the stuff and to download. That way you can replicate. So every book is now a center of meme pestilence from the perspective of the censors. Every book can be used to replicate and re-upload. I mean, there's a reciprocal relationship between the books and the web. These things will be interactive. Just like going on a magazine's website and you click the links, well, your book will be interactive, or newspaper or tabloid. But again, we're getting behind print 2.0. All right, going through some comments. Now, as far as wearing us down, I've described this thing as a hydra with 20 heads and 80 neck stumps, but we have been improving. And I think right now, after this last attack where they pulled the plug on 25 different podcast platforms, I think that was the last vulnerability that needed to be exposed. But now moving forward, ground zero, this is it. Go to ips.monster, get on the newsletter, get the text alerts, and you will stay in the know. And we're just going to build up from here. I don't see us going back down in numbers. And the reason why we want the numbers is that we want to have as many eyes watching as possible whenever some event happens. We have more than 160 press pass carrying reporters right now, and very soon we're going to be activating them like we did in 2020 during the pandemic. By the way, if you don't have a press pass, go to infiniteplane.media. Like I said, I'm sending out a shipment of press passes tomorrow. Another recent development, because one of the reasons why it's a big deal they killed the podcasting thing, is they demonetized it. So now I know for a fact that's not the future for this channel for revenue generation. But I think print is it. I'm going through all of my old books, ebooks, pamphlets, and I'm editing, I'm republishing here very soon. I'm going to make up for lost ground, that's for sure. All right, let's see. This is going to be Interesting week ahead. Donald Trump's going to be announcing his second term. I don't know if it's going to be with Kanye, JFK Jr., Hitler. Who's going to run with Trump? We shall see. Alex Jones, again, if you're one of his neighbors, he's out of food, so you might want to watch out. They're cutting off his access to all of his resources. Making sure we haven't missed anything else. All right, well, same time tomorrow, if not earlier, and get on the newsletter. That way, if you missed out on this, we had a long phone call tonight. I think we had Lynn on for about 111 minutes. That is going to be in the archive. That will be emailed out immediately after. And we are back on SoundCloud. SoundCloud Infinite Plane Radio. All right, thanks for joining. This is the 33rd Degree, Lucifer Tim, going back to the 24/7.
They telling me different things. That's the post people pulling the strings. But I know they playing the games. Since I found out today, I live on it every